Yeehaw, we're live. Hi, guys.
This is the last book in this four.
Oh, what's going on? What's going on with the sound? Hang on, guys.
Chris and I said we believed that Pope Benedict was going to step down in April of 2012. When 2012 came and went and it didn't appear that he had stepped down, we thought, okay, well, we missed the date. We still believe it's going to happen. No pope had retired like that in over 600 years. And we were being told by all kinds of Catholic experts, never going to happen. The pope's going to die in office. You guys are insane. But then February 2013 rolls around. The whole world knows now that the Vatican announces that Pope Benedict has retired the Petrine office. But not only that, the same day, their El Observatorio Romano,
I can't work
media
it.
outlet, right, give an interview with the New York Times in which they admit that Pope Benedict had actually secretly resigned at the end of March in 2012, and they.
Okay, guys, we're going to do it again. I was trying to get the sound right.
This is the last book in this 4-year investigation, but it doesn't mean it's the last book from me and Chris.
Right. Good.
Well, one of your last books that you've written about the Pope, it was a shocking prediction. It's the one that really sent waves around the world.
G'day, boss. Good to see you, mate.
They predicted that the Pope would resign. Popes just don't resign.
Right.
Very seldom does a Pope resign. So you wrote in a book before it happened, and you thought it was going to happen, right?
Well, actually, and it's around page 450, I don't remember exactly, but in the book Petrus Romanus, in which Chris and I said we believed that Pope Benedict was going to step down in April of 2012. We predicted that a year in advance. When 2012 came and went and it didn't appear that he had stepped down, we thought, okay, well, we missed the date. We still believe it's going to happen. No pope had retired like that in over 600 years. And we were being told by all kinds of Catholic experts, never going to happen. The pope's going to die in office. You guys are insane. But then February 2013 rolls around. The whole world knows now that the Vatican announces that Pope Benedict has retired the Petrine office. But not only that, the same day, their El Observatorio Romano, their official media outlet, right, give an interview with the New York Times in which they admit that Pope Benedict had actually secretly resigned at the end of March in 2012, and they made it internally official April 2012, the exact date that Chris Putman and I said that we believed that he was going to. Well, then our phones wouldn't stop ringing. We had people all over the world, including from Rome, calling us wanting to know who was our insider at the Vatican.
Wow.
And we laughingly always say now, if we told them it was the Holy Spirit, that really messed them up.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Chris, it's so great to have you here.
It is.
When that book, I was on live television when that event took place, and I think it was I was at Daystar.
Lightning struck the Vatican.
Yeah, we were on Johnny's show.
Yeah, it was. That's right. I remember seeing it. Remember that day, the lightning.
That's
and it was. I mean, it struck. It's
More interesting.
Did you
really?
Have you all seen that picture? The lightning striking the Vatican, and then
Benedict said that.
we were on the air with
Joni.
Joni,
Right, on
but
Facebook.
also with a prophet,
Yes, we were with John Paul Jackson.
John Paul Jackson, and it was an epic moment.
It really
Yes,
was.
it was.
Yeah.
And we knew you guys had predicted it, and then you weren't off though.
No,
The date, your date was actually exactly right. How did that get mixed up?
well, let's be really fair about how that happened. Okay.
Okay.
Now, we didn't exactly get a voice from the sky that gave us that day. I dug up a lot of old documents. I found a book. There was a Catholic insider, but he happened to be dead at the time, right? His name is Father Rene Thibault. He's a Jesuit priest from Belgium. He was a university professor. He happened to be a passionate believer in this Malachi prophecy of the popes, to the point he wrote a book. It was all in French called Les Mysterious Prophecy of the Popes in French. And I had to translate this book. But the crazy thing was, over and over again, the year two.
So, Vas, I'm an hour later, am I?
And he had these elaborate schemes where he calculated the same date over and over again as the date the final pope would arrive. Okay, this was in print, provable. I have a copy in my office, 1951.
Yeah.
Nobody was talking about 2012.
64 years ago.
You know, the Mayan calendar wasn't on the news. You know, nobody knew about any of that. And yet, this is what he said. One of the simplest ways is he, like when, in 1950, he calculated the average reign of a pope. Just took the number of years divided by the number of popes. And he got 11 years. And he goes, if I extrapolate that to the rest of the list, it'll land in 2012. I even have a spreadsheet on my website that shows all of that. So, you know, we heard this over and over again. And then Tom emails me an article, the Vatican Insider, and it said, rumors spread that Benedict may step down. And so we just went for it. And we put it in the book because it was very interesting and it had to do with prophecy of the popes. And, you know, that's kind of risky because our book came out in March. And so we're predicting the pope will step down a month later. That's not a long shelf life if you're wrong.
Yeah. That's why, you know, when prophets give you the exact date and it's way before, you know, people always said, how do you know if a prophet is real?
Yeah.
All I say is if their prophecies come true, most likely their prophets are for real. They're a real prophet.
I don't like to call myself a prophet. I mean, I call myself a researcher. I mean, Rene Thibault might be a prophet. You know, I don't know. But he was right.
But there has to be instinct and discernment. You have to, you know, and even a little guts to be able to write what you find and what's being revealed. And isn't there something that happens inside of you when you see truth and you know that you're finding it in pieces and pieces, and then you put it together? And this new book that comes out today on our show, The Final Roman.
Okay, this guy's Jimmy Baker. He had a big scandal in the 80s where he went to jail, but he gets decent people on his shows like Tom Horn, Chris Putman, and Steve Cioccolani. So he gets trusted pastors and ministers on his show. And I haven't heard him blaspheme, so I don't mind his show.
Emperor, the Islamic Antichrist, and the Vatican's Last Crusade. You do have short titles.
I know. I'm trying to figure out how are we going to shorten it when we're talking about it with each other. Like,
We'll call it the new book.
Yeah.
But how many prophecies would you say are in this new book?
Well, there are several predictions that we make, but they're probably the biggest predictions we've ever made before. And there is another part, and we'll talk about this maybe as later as we get into the book, where what I call the quickenings. And it has to do with the fact that when I was a young preacher, I died. I was dead for about 15 minutes.
wow.
And I went to a place, and there were things that happened. Like I say, we can talk about that a little bit later. But since that day, there have been moments. It always happens in the middle of the night where I will literally just wake up, sit up out of bed, and I will know that I know something. And I have to jump up and write it down as fast as possible because
Yes.
it'll start going
Yes.
away from me.
Yes.
But I'll see it as clearly as a vision. And every time that has happened in my life, that has come to pass very accurately. The Assemblies of God, the Oregon District, there were some things I told them, the superintendent on down, that happened exactly, including the death of a guy. that happened exactly in the way that I said that it was going to happen. Well, what had happened when Chris Putman was doing this research, and he uncovered this amazing prophecy of the mysterious prophecy of the popes by Father Rene Thibault, we were just looking at it as research. Okay, it's kind of interesting. He's approaching this from all these different angles, including mystical angles, Catholic mysticism, the
Good to see
the
you.
movement of the planets and the stars, and just all kinds of stuff, right? But we were only looking at it as a researcher until one night, middle of the night, bam, it hits me like a rocket. And I literally sat up in bed and I knew that Chris had found something here and it was absolutely going to happen in April of 2012. So I jumped up, I wrote everything down, I got a hold of him, and that's when we started becoming a little more vocal about the fact that we really believe this is going to happen. We had, we never said, "Thus saith the Lord God." We didn't do that. We both say we're not prophets. We're just very careful researchers. But sometimes you see things, whether or not you're a prophet, as a seer, and you just have a confidence about it. You know it's going to happen, right? You've done that, Jim.
Yeah.
There have been times in your life when you've seen things. You on one of your programs not long ago, you talked about some of the things you believe is going to happen in America. Those are things you see. When they come to you clearly as a vision, they're so powerful that whether or not the rest of the world believes it, you can't do anything but believe it. You know it's going to happen. So you have a level of conviction about it, right?
Now, this book, we haven't even gotten into what, forgive me, and I'm going to call it the good stuff, because the what's coming in the last day, there's really good coming as well as some bad. I want you to have this. We have introduced this book, one of the first people on earth to be able to introduce this book. So can you bring us up to where we're going to introduce this new book?
Yeah, sure. Well, so the prophecy of the popes happens exactly like we said it was going to. Our phones are lit up, and now we're out there. We're doing media everywhere, right? We're on your show. We're on Sid Roth. We're on all these Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. We're just doing all these programs, right? And whenever we were on a program where people could call in, they were asking a question at that time. They were asking, what do you make of the Vatican being out there now talking about aliens? And do you think it's somehow connected to this final Pope's arrival? That question was coming up over and over because if you can...
Bas, it's 6 years old, so it's good to see what they actually predict comes true, because I'm pretty sure they go into more than just this.
Paul, at the time, they had the VatiLeaks scandal. That's why the Pope, by the way, retired privately to just a few members of the Curia, because people were leaking information out of the Vatican office. They were trying to control it. That's why he did it in secrecy. But at the same time, around that time, the Vatican had what they called an astrobiology study week at the Pontifical Academy in Rome, where all of Rome's astronomers and scientists and whatever were. And but it was the question around that astrobiology week was this: what will the impact on faith, on Christianity be, given the disclosure or the discovery of advanced extraterrestrial intelligence? And the world was like, what in the world is Rome calling scientists from around the world?
Okay, we now know they're doing soft disclosure with the UFOs. It's been on Fox News, and we know they're doing soft disclosure. So here's one to hit the nail on the head.
To convene a study to say what is going to be the impact on Christianity, and that's happening at the same time with the Pope. So they're saying the final Pope is arriving. Is that somehow connected with this whole thing with the aliens? What in the world? So the Vatican sent out their two top astronomers, Jose Gabriel Funes, who at that time was the head of the Vatican Observatory Research Group. I don't want to get bogged down here in too many details. And Guy Consolmagno, who was the Pope's private astronomer, and we interviewed him 5 times from Rome via the internet. I found some amazing things about stuff they believe too. But we were trying to get to the bottom of this. Why are you suddenly talking about aliens? Why are you out there saying we would baptize aliens into the Catholic faith, right? And then they started changing it.
I do
and the way
indeed,
they started
boss.
changing
I
the
do
language
indeed.
started becoming very concerning. They started saying it's more likely than not that we are at official disclosure. And you've got to wonder, what do they know or think they know that they would be saying something like that? And then they started saying, it probably won't be us baptizing the aliens into the Catholic faith, but rather they will be coming here to baptize us into a corrected understanding of the gospel. In Rome right now, there are Opus Dei level, top level theologians for the church that are writing white papers that are going through the doctrinal review process right now that literally say that we could make the discovery of information, extraterrestrial information, that is going to require us to rethink everything we've ever thought we knew about the gospel, about the Godhead. And so it just, all these red flags were, what do these people think they know? Have they made like some Mephistophelian bargain with some entity that they think is an intelligence? Well, I mean, where are they coming from, right? Why are they saying this stuff? We're going to have to rewrite the gospel. We're going to have to change. And then they started saying it's going to be required. So we finally said, okay, the only way to get to the bottom line, we got to try to go to the top of Mount Graham in Arizona. And you remember that?
Yes.
That's when we went from the prophecy of the popes over to Exo Vaticana, right? And we went to the top of Mount Graham. We met with the Jesuit who was on duty there that day. They let us walk all over the Vatican's Advanced Technology Telescope. We went to the radio telescope. We went to the top of the hill. They gave us a half a day with a private guide, a technician, in the large binocular telescope, the largest telescope of its kind in the world, where the Lucifer device is at. And just a huge amount of opportunity, right? But then we come off the mountain. Now we think we know everything, right? We rush that book to the printer, and then we get contacted by the Apache Nation. Because I had said on your program and on some other programs, the Apaches were on Mount Graham ahead of everybody else, and that's why they fought in federal court to try to stop the Vatican and NASA from building an observatory on the top of that mountain, because it's like a graveyard. There's dead bones of their people up there, right? And they don't want machines in there disturbing the ground. And that's why they were fighting against them. Well, then I get contacted by a member of the Apache Nation, and he said, well, that's true, but that's not really the picture. And he was the one who informed us that Mount Graham is one of the 4 holiest mountains in all of the world to all American indigenous peoples, all American Indian tribes. And it is because, they said, that mountain is what you would call a stargate, a doorway, a portal, through which entities have entered into and exited this 3-dimensional reality since the dawn of time. And then when we learned that's true, I went out and vetted that was true, then we really had to wonder, why would the Vatican have fought in federal court to get on the top of that mountain? Why not just go to a different mountain, right, and build your observatory? Towns that would love to have you for the industry or whatever, right? Why that mountain? So that led, of course, to the last time we were here with the book On the Path of the Immortals. Chris Putman in Sedona, me in the Four Corners area. We shot a lot of film. By the way, we're going to be producing a documentary film on that. But then we said, okay, we're done. We're finished. That's it, right? But then we came full circle, because if you read these 4 books, there's this one personality that keeps turning up in all 4 books, and that is the Kume Sybil, the oldest of the prophetesses of the god Apollo, which, by the way, is prophesied in the scripture as the...
Yeah, Bas, apparently they look at the sky through infrared. If you look through infrared, it shows up UFOs and specters in the sky. That's apparently what goes on.
As much as they believe in the prophecies of the Old Testament prophets. And she made a prophecy that this guy uncovered on the final Roman emperor, and it ties everything that we had been talking about together in one unit, and it packs a wallet, brother. What they believe, and when they believe it's going to happen, is astonishing.
On National Greyhound Adoption Day, will you help us find a forever home?
This is how I used to get paid. Last email. Your invoice is now 350.
There are events that are unfolding in the world, and I want to know if they're part of biblical prophecy. In other words, if what the prophets in the scripture foresaw also includes activity that's being done by these people that have in their heart. I'm not saying Catholics are occultists, but there are occultists who also believe in these prophecies. They're codified in Washington, D.C. at the Vatican, the structures. These things were engineered in ancient times for one express purpose, and that was to literally bring up the spirits of Nephilim from out of the underworld to re-inhabit bodies once again. This was deeply occultic material that came from the Watchers. So if you're going to read the Old Testament, for instance, and I said this the last time I was on your program, if you don't understand what went on with the Watchers and Psalms 82 and the divine council, you can't understand a great deal of the Old Testament. Doesn't even make any sense to you. You think God's a genocidal maniac. What in the world is he doing telling Saul and all the armies of Israel go out and wipe out all these people? The only way you can understand that is to understand that there was a genetics revolution that went on. All flesh, both man and beast, became corrupt. And these entities came down to the world to literally wipe out God's people and take it was
right.
them.
Yeah.
So in the same way, I think you can only understand some of what's unfolding around the world today if you understand where these people are coming from. What they believe. Let me say this: that to us, the Bible is the only absolute authority.
Yeah.
Right.
Amen.
We don't need the American Indian myths or anything else to make us believe in this, right?
Yeah.
Okay, guys, I just noticed something.
If you understand where these people are coming from, what they believe. Let me say this: that to us, the Bible is the only absolute authority.
Yeah.
Right.
Amen.
We don't need the American Indian.
Unbelievable! Not one black person in the audience. Look.
The Bible is the only absolute authority.
Yeah.
Right.
Amen.
We don't need the American Indian myths or anything else to make us believe in this, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, what America needs now we need good presidency. We need a lot of stuff, but America more than anything else needs preachers of this word.
Of the word.
Preachers of the word. So that's what we believe. All we like to do, we love history. And if you go to Bible college to earn a degree at a seminary to become a pastor, you have to study
here
history,
we go.
you study American history,
Playing up
history,
already.
you study books that were, contiguous to some of the other books of the time. You have to study all this stuff. But what you do is you get a richer understanding of the cultural things that were going on and whatever that makes you appreciate when you read texts in the scripture, you get a better understanding of what they're talking about, how that was happening, how that was playing out in the real world. But I have to say, it was thrilling to find out that the oldest stories of the American Indians say this: there was a good creator God who made everything that was good. There was a terrible reptilian being that came down to deceive the world. There were giants that emerged upon the earth. God sent a flood around the world that wiped out all of the giants and saved mankind from that destruction. So they literally over here are writing this down while Moses over there is writing the Pentateuch saying there were giants in the earth in those days. So it is a corroboration. Those people didn't even have they didn't have the internet. They weren't talking to each other. They were just writing it down as it happened. So it corroborates and it builds our faith even more to know that this wasn't just a bunch of old Hebrew dudes sitting around saying, we ought to come up with some cool stories, right? It's the word of God. It's rich and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword, right?
Yeah. I'd like to just add a little bit to that. Because a lot of people criticize Tom and I because we look at these extra biblical prophecies and things of a pagan nature or even of a cult nature. But where I'm coming from is if Christianity is true, it's true. And I mean that's important to say these days.
Yeah.
People don't believe in absolute truth, do they?
No,
everything's relative, right? And
Yeah.
you have your truth, and I have my truth. And that's the biggest piece of nonsense that's ever been sold on our country. And that's why we're here. That's where we are today. Believe it or not. It happened in the 60s, and it moved forward. It's relativism. It's all through our morality. And unfortunately, it happens to be in our financial institutions now, too. Typically, math does not have a lot of subjective type of thinking, but apparently it does nowadays. And so, that's where we are in the world, and that's the way people think. Now, what we're saying is if Christianity is true, even these pagan nations, even these occultists, they can't help but betray that fact. All right? Now, when Yahweh forbids sorcery, necromancy, these things that Christians don't like to talk about too much, that implies that Yahweh believes they're real. Because he wouldn't make rules about things you couldn't do. He didn't tell me not to fly like a chicken. You know, he was serious.
Yeah.
Because those things do something. All right. And because they do, if, you know, Israel becoming a nation again in 48 is as significant as we believe it is, you know, the time's short. And we should be seeing a ramping up in the occult realm because they know it's coming too. And so we're just keeping our eyes open. And, you know, I call our genre speculative eschatology. And I admit I'm speculating most of the time because I don't know. I'm not an absolutist when it comes to my theory about the end times because I think God keeps that mysterious for a reason. You know, the devil reads his prophecies too. I think God wants to keep them guessing.
Yeah, that's a good word right there. Yeah.
We've been bumping up against the final Roman emperor. And Chris, who or what is the final Roman emperor? Can you explain that to me?
Sure.
Why is it relevant today?
The Antichrist.
Okay.
I mean, that's who I think it is. And whether he's really a Roman or not, I don't care. I mean, that's not.
Oh, that is relevant to me.
I don't want to.
There's a lot of people are going to accept the Antichrist according to the scriptures because they're going to be deceived by him, right?
Roman to me is vague. Is what I mean by that. I don't mean he has to be Italian or from the city of Rome or necessarily of Roman origin. It might have another connotation that I don't quite understand. And that isn't really part of the prophecy. But I mean, the final Roman emperor is really a fictional character. Okay, but the people who believe in it will believe the Antichrist is that guy. That's kind of what I mean. So he doesn't necessarily have to be anything for real. Now, here's the deal. Catholics and Muslims believe in a final king who's going to show up before Jesus and set the world to their belief system. Okay, for Muslims, he's called the Mahdi. For Roman Catholics, he's usually called the Great Catholic Monarch, or sometimes he used to be called the Great French King because they thought he would be in the tradition of Charlemagne. Okay, and they believed France was traditionally a Catholic country, that this great king would arrive and convert the whole world to Catholicism. Now, you could find their prophets writing about this all throughout the late Middle Ages, you know, up into the time of the Reformation and on forward. In today's modern Catholic network, you'll have Desmond Birch has an end time show, and he talks about this great Catholic monarch. And this is a 20th century show, a new show right now. It's on. So they still believe this guy. Now, I'm going to tell you that final Roman emperor character and the Mahdi are the same character, but he's a literary type, and he doesn't exist.
Wow. We're sitting here kind of blown away.
Zach, did you know this?
Well, I read the book, so yeah.
But I mean, that the Catholic Church is looking for a king besides Jesus.
They are.
That shocks me. I'm sorry.
Not even the Pope.
Nobody's ever told me that.
Yeah. And it gets even.
I need to study more, I guess.
There's certain things even get more interesting than that with what the Roman Catholic Church foresee as the end times of the destruction of Rome. The Roman Catholics actually believe that Rome is going to be destroyed.
And the Muslims want to do it.
They do.
And
Is that right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's the interesting point that Chris was just now making.
We're in an era, people. We're coming on some stuff. You better know a little bit about what's coming on Earth. Otherwise, you're going to be really, really going crazy because you're going to say, "My Lord, what's happening?" But to know some truth, won't hurt at all.
Well, this final Roman emperor or the great Catholic monarch, or what the Muslims would call the Mahdi, all came out of a prophecy from the Kume Sibyl. And the Kume is the most famous of the ancient prophetesses of the god Apollo. So when she's talking about there is going to come a final world dictator, a benevolent dictator, by the way, imagine that, a benevolent dictator. She's talking about Apollo. She's talking about the prophecy on the Great Seal of the United States, the Novus Ordo Seclorum, which is her prophecy that "'tis thine own Apollo reigns." He is going to literally rise up from out of the underworld, inhabit a man, and become the king of planet Earth. So it's strange how this went full circle, but it was her prophecy that was Christianized by the Roman Catholics throughout the Dark Ages and became what they call the Great Catholic Monarch. Now, I believe, by the way, that this is, Chris made a reference a moment ago to that program. That's on there's a 24-hour-a-day.
ETWN.
Yeah, ETWN, 24-hour-a-day Catholic network. It was on that program recently. They were talking about we're living in prophetic times and the great Catholic monarch is on his way.
Yeah.
Well, Chris found evidence that the Muslims actually plagiarized the prophecy of the Kume Sibyl and turned it into the Mahdi doctrines. When Joel Richardson was here talking about the Islamic Antichrist, they actually took the same prophecy of the Kume, but they said, oh, no, not going to be your king, going to be our king. We're going to call him the Mahdi. Right. And it became their popular doctrine, but it's who we in evangelical Christianity would call the coming of the Antichrist. Exactly. Now, here is
would I love to get Joel and you. I'm going to do a big show. I like to get about 25 of my favorite prophets all together because everybody's had a piece to add. And I'll tell you, we're in a day that you need some revelation because I'll tell you what, these days are coming.
And there are Christians and, of course, the non-Christian world following what they believe to be true. But if it's not in the Bible, it is nothing more than a deception and a lie. And it's going to lead ultimately to a violent conflict. And in this book, Chris has written an excellent chapter on the battle for the holy mountain of God, which is the Temple Mount. That's why there's so much strife in Israel today over what happens on the Temple Mount. That's where the final battle, Armageddon, will take place. And but the prophecies that are being followed by Muslims, by our brothers and sisters, the Jewish people, and by many within the Christian church today are based on things that are not in the Bible. And because of that, we are going to wind up with a lot of blood being shed before Jesus comes down to straighten things out.
Wow. Tom, you believe that Catholics have set themselves up for deception?
Yeah. Well, because of what Derik and Chris were just saying and what they've written about in this book. Think about this prophecy that is believed by modern Catholics today. Their prophets, their mystics, they're talking about it right now. They're blogging about it right now. You know why they believe, by the way, that the arrival of the final Roman emperor, or what they call the great Catholic monarch, might be here, might be imminent, is because part of the Kume Sibyl prophecy said he will appear when the final pope arrives. When a final pope arrives, and the Catholics call him the angelic pope. When this final pope arrives, he's going to help this emperor. Now,
so you had already, your last book, you predicted the final pope.
Right.
And so, I mean, it's crazy that a pope would resign, but this was supposed to be the final pope. And so these things could be happening. So there's an old saying that they don't use anymore. It's later than you think.
Yeah. Well, so this is a headline. This was published like 4 days ago now, from the Catholic News Association, which is actually owned by the 24-hour EW, whatever it is, the Catholic. It's owned by them. This is their news service. Well, look at the headline. Is Francis the last pope? A rare interview with Archbishop Gonfalon. Now, let me tell you 2 reasons why this is very important. Because Archbishop Gonfalon is the Pope's personal pastor. He is an archbishop. He is a prefect, meaning that he's like, the upper crust, if you will, at the Vatican. And he's Benedict's personal secretary. So he works with both of these popes, right? So they interviewed him and they said, what do you make? 2 things. They said, what do you make of lightning striking the Vatican 2 times on the day that Pope Benedict stepped down? The guy that's interviewing him said, some people think there could have been some mystical qualities to that. And he goes on to admit that very day he talked to Pope Benedict about it when they found out that lightning struck the Vatican 2 different times. And they both felt that nature, that the liturgical order had spoken that this was acceptable to the gospel.
And why 2 times? The Bible says, let it be established with 2 or 3 witnesses. That's why I reckon 2 times.
Now, where are they coming from with this? Because if you understand the old Roman word inauguratio, where we make the word inauguration when we inaugurate a president or we inaugurate a new pope, that comes from inauguratio in augur, atio. The augurs were the soothsayers of ancient Rome. Well, when they wanted to know, do the gods approve of the appointment of a new pope, a new king, a new leader, they would do their rituals in front of the gods. But if the gods answered with thunder and lightning, they knew that this appointment, this change, had been approved by the gods. And so this archbishop is, when he's saying nature had spoken, he's telling you exactly the belief system of the ancient augurs. The gods had appointed Benedict to step down so this final pope could arrive. But then it gets even more interesting, and I don't like reading stuff. But here's a little short excerpt.
This is amazing stuff.
So then he said, okay, well, what about the prophecy of the popes? Some people are making a big deal, i.e. Tom Horn and Chris Putman are making a big deal about it, right? What do you think about it? Well, here's what the archbishop says. Okay, during the interview, it referenced an old prophecy that has recently gained traction in some clerical discussion. The prophecy of the popes, also known as the prophecy of Malachi, according to which, this is what and this guy's a Catholic. The Roman guy is for Catholic News Service is interviewing him. He says, according to which Pope Francis is considered to be the last pope. Here's what the archbishop said. Indeed, when looking at that prophecy and considering how there was always a sound reference of popes mentioned in its history, it gives me the shivers, Archbishop Gunsween said. Although Catholics are not required to accept the prophecy, speaking from a historical experience, one has to say, yes, this is a wake-up call. So you have the archbishop who is the personal pastor. So you know that this archbishop has private conversations with Benedict and with Pope Francis, and this subject has evidently come up because he didn't say, I don't know what you're talking about, or I got to get back to you. He said this has caused shivers to go up our spines, and it is, what is his final line there? It is a wake-up call. He is the final pope. This is the first time that a highly placed Vatican representative has given credibility to the prophecy of the pope. Well, now, so bring it back over. Why do I say it's a great deception? Because here's the way this prophecy works. It says that first, there is going to be a great dictatorial leader, this benevolent dictator known as the great monarch. He's going to arrive, and this final pope is going to help him set up a global dictatorship, right? They are going to resist the arrival of the Antichrist. They, the Catholics believe, are going to be the ones who are going to fight against the coming of the Antichrist. That is absolutely backward from what we believe the book of Revelation says, where it says, no, first, there's going to come a deceiver claiming to be a Christ-like character, an Antichrist, and a false prophet who is going to help him get national attention. They're going to go to war, all right, but they're going to war against the return of the real Jesus Christ. So they've taken the book of Revelation and literally turned it backwards. And they are setting up the Roman Catholic, which is, of course, you know, a very large part of our world population, setting them up to accept the coming of the Antichrist as their savior. And this false prophet as their angelic pope, saying they're going to be the ones to fight against the Antichrist, which will actually be the second coming of Jesus, and they are going to go to war. It's called the Battle of Armageddon. So it is a monstrous, astonishing level of deception, and now the Vatican is weighing in. Now the Vatican itself is saying, yes, he is the final pope.
All these things are happening, and yet the church people are not very many looking at what's happening now, so that the day will not come upon you unaware. I keep saying that. But he said, I don't want that day to come up on you unaware. He wants you to know what's happening. Now, this book, you've been with us up to, I think, 2 days now on our show. And we haven't even gotten into to what, forgive me, but I'm going to call it the good stuff, because the what's coming in the last day, there's really good coming as well as some bad. And you got a lot yet to tell us on this program. Tom, you make some pretty big predictions in this book. I want you to give us some examples of what you see coming.
Well, first of all, I believe that ISIS and their cohorts are going to use a weapon of mass destruction soon.
Oh, you started right out with a big one.
Yeah. And I believe it's going to be a trigger event that is going to cause both the Roman Catholics and the Islamic State to believe that they are in the middle of their end times prophecies. How is that going to happen? Now, I go into a lot of detail in the book, which we can't cover all of that sitting here on this program. What I predict is not going to be pretty. A weapon of mass destruction, and it's going to be of such size and scope as to call for the Pope to call for the rejuvenation of the Christian rules for just war, to call for a coalition army through the United Nations. The U.S. will be involved, Russia will be involved, some of the Muslim nations will be involved, and they will put together a coalition army. But what's going to wipe out ISIS, to track them to the ends of the earth and obliterate them? Now, that's going to play right into the hands of the Islamic radicals, because that's exactly what they want.
Can you get that? You wrap your mind around that we have an enemy that wants us to destroy them?
Yes.
Because their war, a war upon them, will bring their
Mahdi.
Christ or Mahdi,
Right.
who we call the Antichrist.
Right. Well, the other part about this, so think how this will be a fulfillment of their prophecy. Joel Richardson's been on your program. He has explained the belief system. I've heard Zach explain this on television before too, how they believe that they're going to have this pivotal war. Part of it will be at Dabiq, which is kind of their version of Armageddon, right?
Yeah.
But their 13 or 1600-year-old hadith that is allegedly given by Muhammad said that at the end of time, they will go to war against the armies of Rome. Now, a lot of people have tried to figure out, well, how in the world is that going to work, right? But the way the Islamic radicals are going to see this is if the Pope calls for the justification of just war from Roman Catholicism, they're going to see this army fighting under the banner of Rome as a new crusade. They're going to see it as a literal fulfillment of their 1600-year-old hadith. But the Vatican, on the other hand, are going to see it as their own apocalyptic vision, leading to the arrival of their final Roman emperor, the person who's going to come alongside them and help them defeat the enemy. And so both of them are going to see themselves in the midst of their own apocalyptica. By the way, some other very interesting things about this ancient prophecy from the Cumae Sibyl that was adopted and Christianized by the Roman Catholics and then used by the Mohammedans to create this doctrine that Joel Richardson's book was written about. 3 things she says is going to happen. Number 1, she says, this will happen when a final pope arrives. So once again, it ties directly to the arrival of the final pope. Secondly, she says, democracy will be viewed around the world as a failed system.
Wow.
And that's why you get a final Roman emperor, because the world's going to want to return back to a socialistic Marxist type of dictatorial system. She literally predicted that this will happen. Now, look at America today, where 70% of Americans polled say they have lost confidence in democracy. And now the Pope is pushing for socialism, Marxism. So you literally have the unfolding of this prophecy around us right now, right? And then the third thing that she said will happen, she said this Pope will combine with this Pope and this Emperor, the angelic Pope and the final Emperor will combine themselves with the Mohammedan religions and the Jewish religions, and they'll drive out the extremists. So they'll drive out the extremists like the Islamic radicals called ISIS, but they'll embrace the rest of the Muslim communities. They'll drive the radicals out of Christianity too, Jim. i.e. Bible-believing people like us. They're going to drive them out. And what's happening in our world right now? The Pope's meeting with the Grand Imam. The Pope's meeting with the Muslims. He's having Muslim prayers inside the Vatican. He has said that the Muslims ought to be breeding throughout Europe to assure their dominant presence for the future. He's saying all these things, right? But we got to stamp out the extremists. That's what we got to do. We got to work together to get rid of the extremists. Here in the United States, what are we hearing? There are limits on our free speech, where our Christian universities are being told they can't say certain things that are politically incorrect because we're the extremists. What was the first thing when a man attacked that gay bar the other day? First thing the next day, the Christians are being blamed. It's our fault. We're the ones that caused this because of the extremists in our faith that believe that some things are a sin, and we shouldn't be saying that. We shouldn't be talking about it. We're the ones that created the atmosphere in which this kind of radicalism, the fires of radicalism, are growing. So her prophecy, it is as if today we are seeing every bit, piece, and part, from the final pope to the Catholic mystics talking about it on television, saying we think maybe the man is here. We think it's about to happen. To this week, a top archbishop in Rome saying, it sends shivers up our spine, but it's clearly a sign that the final pope is here. I mean, really?
Wow.
If people can hear this stuff and not get shaken, I just can't help them.
Yep. And I could provide some documentation for the claim that he's making about the Pope. I mean, I think all the things that we said at Petrus Romanus, we said that we thought this last Pope would be the false prophet of biblical prophecy before Pope Francis was elected, okay? And everything he's done since then has done nothing but confirm that. That doesn't mean it was right, but it doesn't mean it was wrong, okay? Now, the way you disprove a hypothesis in science, you try to falsify the hypothesis. Nothing has falsified it, and everything he's done has fallen right in line. That doesn't mean I know he's the false prophet, but he's a false prophet, okay? And he said this in regard to socialism: equitable economic social progress can only be attained by joining scientific and technical abilities with an unfailing commitment to solidarity accompaniment by a generous, disinterested spirit of gratuitous at every level. A combination to this equitable development must also be made by both the international activity aimed at the integral human development of all the world's peoples by the legitimate redistribution of economic benefits by the state.
Yeah.
That's Karl Marx.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Socialism, communism.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Right?
It makes no sense, because what people are saying is the current system of government isn't working, so let's give the government more power.
Right.
Yeah.
The Bible keeps saying about believing a lie in the last days. I've never seen the mass of a world, people believing lies.
Right.
I mean, you got a group of people that wants to kill us, and no one wants to stop them.
Right.
And Graham, I don't know if you saw the show that she was on, but she was on a few weeks ago, and she sat right where you are, and she says, no matter what, she says, I will never vote for a Democrat. And I oh my God, they're coming for me now. Like, this is it. That's as far as you're going to go. But she said, the reason I would not vote for a Democrat is because of their platform, what they stand for. And she said, I cannot stand for the killing of babies.
Right.
But yet the church today, most of them believe that.
Look, if people read this book, it's not all doom and gloom. We also predict the greatest revival in the history of humanity,
That's
right?
right. Yeah.
I personally think, look,
America.
here's what I think. I think that the world is ready for a revolution.
Yeah.
I think that Americans are ready for a revolution. It kind of reminds me of the Jesus movement with the hippies. Remember the Jesus freaks, right? And marching on Washington, D.C. They were against the Vietnam War. They no longer trusted the government, whatever. But when you turn away from your authoritarian figures, you still need an authority. And what happened with the Jesus people was they found God. They found Christ, right? So I think what we're seeing right now is very healthy. Now, and by that, what I mean is Donald Trump, who can't put 7 words back to back in a cohesive sentence, is not only the presumptive nominee for the Republican Party, but his numbers in the primaries were ahead of everybody in recent memory, right? So what is that saying? It's saying that the American people are sick and tired of career politicians telling them one thing, then doing something else, and in the meantime, raising taxes to pay for more abortions. Americans are tired of that. And they don't trust either of the 2 establishment parties, right? But what you just saw in Brexit, what you just saw in Europe, tells you that this is not just an American condition. This is a global condition right now. People are sick and tired of being ran by elites and international bankers. Franklin Graham said something smart this week when he said something to the effect that the New World Order elite just got a black eye, right?
Right.
So I think it's healthy. I think it's really healthy, but I'm not oblivious to the fact that nationalism also gave rise to Adolf Hitler. Right. So I think we have to be really careful about where we're going, with what's happening right now. But for me personally, I put a positive spin on it. I'd have loved to have had another Ronald Reagan, but he's not here, right? It gives me nightmares to think of 4 more years of the current policy or worse under a Democratic president. That's a really scary thought.
And this ISIS, what kind of warfare? It's a major mega bomb of some sort. Is that what you're seeing from ISIS?
A weapon of mass destruction.
Right.
So it could be an EMP bomb. It could be an atomic bomb.
Chemical weapon, maybe.
Chemical, most likely.
Chemical.
That'd be the easiest.
Dirty bomb.
Dirty bomb. Yeah.
And not just in one place. That's why I'm not saying one thing. It's going to be numerous devices, all coordinated at the same time.
How soon could this be?
Tomorrow.
Yeah. I think.
Yeah, and Tricky's spending a couple of days with his daughter, so he told me he'll be off for a couple of days. I should have said something, guys. Sorry. And Lynn McGill is okay. Lynn is okay. She is out of hospital again.
It's happening now.
God has shown me what ISIS is going to do multiple things. We talked about what he showed me a couple of years ago. But it's multiple things. It could be 100 things at 1 minute.
That's right.
Bam, all over on time. You ain't seen nothing. You think Orlando was big?
Right.
That was one person doing that.
They're getting started. Yeah.
What happened in California? There was 2 people there, and they killed 14 people. Other people have had their heads cut off in the United States. Other people, there's been a lot of terrorism.
Sure.
But what's going to happen when 100 malls or 100 schools or 100 assembly places or football games or whatever, and they're already importing this stuff across the borders?
Sure.
Do you believe that?
Oh, yeah.
How they doing with the internet?
Yeah.
They use Twitter, Facebook for all of it. They recruit that way.
Well, yeah. They send out like 94,000 tweets a day. ISIS does.
Yeah.
Like
What?
94,000 a day.
Are you watching them?
Yeah, I know. I'm afraid of. I kind of want to see what they're saying, but I'm afraid of even. Yeah, I'm
You
afraid
might
of
get branded as one.
Yeah, I'm afraid they'll come after me or something. But
well, I know you've got Dr. William Forstchen as a guest on the
Yeah.
program here. His book Day of Rage is
Yeah.
one of the scariest things I've ever read because
Day
it puts out a very plausible scenario where weak targets, soft targets, elementary schools are targeted by individual agents that are filtered into the country.
Yeah, one of the things in that book, they shoot up a school, kill the whole school basically. Then all the parents coming to come to the school to rescue their kids.
Right.
The traffic backs up, and then the plan is
To get them.
they go through and shoot up all the cars, all the mothers and fathers,
Yeah.
all of the people coming in that are stuck in all this traffic caused by their catastrophe.
Mm.
The plans are devious
Hey,
beyond
Dan, good to
words.
see ya.
You know, what do you think about, Trump's involvement in this? And Trump is not what you wouldn't elect him for Pope even. You wouldn't elect him for your preacher.
Yeah, we're electing a president though. We're not electing a preacher.
Right.
And I couldn't agree more with what Trump has said.
Guys, our daylight savings, we wound the clock back last night. I thought that made me go an hour earlier for you guys, but apparently it's an hour later. So tomorrow I'll go my 11 o'clock instead of 12 o'clock to get back on track.
And I have an article here from Breitbart. It says this: Obama administration and UN announced global police force to fight extremism
Right.
in the United States. Now, the extremists, who are they talking about?
You.
Because they're not talking about the Islamic extremists. They're talking about extremists like you and I. It says Attorney General Loretta Lynch announced at the United Nations that her office will be working in several American cities to form what she called the Strong Cities Network, CSM or SCM, a law enforcement initiative that would encompass the globe. All right, so we're talking about a global police force that would be in the United States across the globe, regulated by the United Nations. This amounts to nothing less than the overriding of American laws, up to and including the United States Constitution, in favor of the United Nations laws that would henceforth be implemented in the United States itself without any consultation of Congress at all. So basically, what the UK just left the European Union, because their laws overshadowed national laws. And so they're saying here with the creation of this global police force that they would override our national laws in America.
Right.
It says the United Nations is Sharia compliant, a world body, and Obama, speaking there just days ago, insisted that violent extremism is not exclusive to Islam, which it basically is. Obama is redefining jihad terror to include everyone but the jihadists.
Right.
So will the UN, driven largely by the Sharia enforcing organization of Islamic cooperation and the pro-Islamic post-American President Obama, use a global police force to crush counter jihad forces? So he's saying, listen, we're going to use the UN to crush counter jihad forces. Those that are saying, listen, we need to stop jihad, those the extremists, we need to stop them.
Right.
And talking about that, there's one more article that's interesting.
Yeah, Di, I thought I was going an hour earlier because I usually let you and Han know if I'm going to go late, but I thought I was going an hour earlier, but I got it around the wrong way.
To note that the United Nations, the UN military vehicles this week have been seen rolling down a Virginia interstate. They've seen them in Virginia. They've seen them in Kentucky. They've seen these UN military vehicles even in Texas. Now, all this started taking place when Loretta Lynch, with the Obama administration, announced that there was going to be a United Nations global police force.
One of the things that the president has done, which is really a disservice to the American people, is by constantly using terms like violent extremism.
Look how young Derik Gilbert looks there. This is only 6 years old, but he looks like 10 years younger. Look at that.
And radical Islam.
Right.
ISIS is not radical Islam. It is mainstream Islam.
That's
It is a pure form of Islam.
It is.
Islamic experts who actually know history and have looked over 14 centuries of Islamic history will say that the Islamic State is trying to go back to the way they lived it in the 7th century. It is not radical. It is mainstream. It is violent Islam. And sadly, that is what you get when you actually read the Quran and follow it.
Exactly.
Look, compare.
Hi, Brian. Welcome to the channel.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, and actually the Pope did recently compare Muhammad and Jesus when he said that the New Testament church could be thought of.
Oh,
as
really?
being, yeah, their
Great Commission was
their
our job.
ambition to be evangelical.
But
to
they didn't
preach
do it
the
with a
gospel.
sword.
Well, but I'm saying he made that
Right.
comparison too.
But that's a illegitimate
And again,
comparison.
that's
Yeah.
what this final prophecy says. The final Roman emperor prophecy says there would be this effort
Right.
to expunge the radicals as they're defined by this coming dictatorship from the Mohammedan religions, the Jewish religions, the Christian religions, and to essentially form a one world order.
It believes in none of them. None of them are true. They're all false. So they all
Right.
merge into this oneism
Right.
where everything's true. You know, it's that same relativist idea I talked about earlier. Now it's pluralism for religion.
We've been talking, honestly, is a revival.
Yeah.
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 It's
Yeah.
people seeking God, people coming back to God, people wanting God more than anything. You gave some of these headlines, and the headlines. This is today. I mean, one day's headline I could preach for a few hours on them, but just one interesting. Our president, who doesn't seem to want us to have guns, he doesn't like guns. And I don't think Hillary likes guns. So if you want your guns gone, you can vote for Hillary. And a lot of people don't want guns. So if you don't want guns, you know, but under our president, Americans are buying 52,600 guns a day. Since he's been president, they have purchased 141.4
Wow.
million.
Mhm.
Yeah, think about that. Guns.
141
Right.
million.
Joe Artist.
Yes.
About that.
Yeah, my son probably owns half of those. So.
That's great. But I mean, you know, the thing about, and we haven't talked about Orlando.
You know, from another country, looking at America and the guns, I look at that in amazement. You guys are so, you love your guns. I understand the amendment, your right to bear arms, but gee, you got a lot of rifles.
With you, but 49 people shot dead
Right.
in that restaurant. That was a gun-free zone, so you couldn't have a gun in that restaurant. But did the criminal, did the murderer read the rules?
They don't read that sign. They'll shoot a hole in the sign as they're walking in the door.
But and then
Okay, I get it with Jimmy Baker, but I'll say this, that happened to him in the 80s. His show now, he does sell his food a bit. I don't like that about him, but he has honourable people on like these guys here. If he had smucks on like Kenny Copeland and Jesse Duplantis and that, I wouldn't be playing Jimmy Baker. He's not that sort of preacher anymore. I think he's a genuine Christian now, and he wouldn't have these guys. These guys wouldn't go on his show if he was a fraud. That's what I think.
our government has not allowed us to hear his. Oh, they completely edited it.
Mhm.
Especially the part where he made his allegiance to the head of ISIS. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
Now, come on,
ended up
Where
releasing
is freedom of speech in the United States of America? Why are they covering up for ISIS? ISIS wants to kill us. You believe ISIS is going to send bombs or drop bombs on our country. How soon do you say it could happen in one day?
It's imminent. It's why I put it in the book. And it's going to be a trigger event that sets a lot of things in motion. Our way of life could change in one day. What he's talking about right there, all we need is one major terrorist event to have the Constitution suspended. And we right now, until at least the election is over, we have a president who would have no problems suspending the Constitution.
I never knew that was an actual position you could take. Suspending. Wow, I never knew that.
And taking up executive, war power act, whatever, martial law. Yeah.
Okay, did naked suspend the I keep forgetting the word. Constitution, yeah.
49 people shot dead in that restaurant. And I did a show, and I had Harmony, our singer over there. I just asked her if she was in the restaurant and she had a gun in her purse. I said, what would she do? She said, I would have killed him, the killer. And the Christians said, well, you can't do that. Well, you haven't read your Bible. You don't even know your Bible. But to kill this man who's killing these people and save 50, or not 50, but say 48 perhaps even, or 47 even, or if they say 45 people. But that was a gun-free zone. So you couldn't have a gun in that restaurant. But did the criminal, did the murderer read the rules?
They don't read that sign. They'll shoot a hole in the sign as they're walking in the door.
But, and then our government has not allowed us to hear his.
Oh, they completely edited it.
Especially the part where he made his allegiance to the head of ISIS. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
Now, come on.
They ended up
Where
releasing it.
is freedom of speech in the United States of America? Why are they covering up for ISIS? ISIS wants to kill us. You believe ISIS is going to send the bombs or drop bombs on our country. How soon do you say it could happen in one day?
It's imminent. It's why I put it in the book. And it's going to be a trigger event that sets a lot of things in motion. Our way of life could change in one day. What he's talking about right there, all we need is one major terrorist event to have the Constitution suspended. And we right now, until at least the election is over, we have a president who would have no problems suspending the Constitution and taking up executive, war power act, whatever, martial law.
Senator McCain, he's the one who helped create ISIS. Obama told him to go and create ISIS, and he did.
Yeah.
So that headline, it says the growing threat of ISIS unleashing a weapon of mass destruction. This is a headline today. And it goes on. FBI didn't inform some Americans, literally thousands of Americans, whose names are on the ISIS kill list.
Right.
I think we have a right to know. Rick Wiles was on the show, and he was pretty upset because they were all around his house.
Yeah. And the terrorists lived 19 miles from the studio. And he was saying, listen, I understand that I'm a pretty high profile guest in this area. Is my name on this list? And his local law enforcement says, well, I have no idea. We haven't seen the list.
He's like, we didn't hear the list.
Right.
How'd the press get it then? Not the list, but they wrote about the press. I wrote about the list there.
Yes.
And the civil uprising escalates as the 8th EU nation threatens referendum. It looks like the EU could fall apart. Do you have any knowledge on any of that?
No, I think it's up to 10 more nations as of today.
Wow.
And speaking of the revolution, this also now has states in the U.S. like Texas and whatever talking about how they, in their own way, might want to do the same thing to divest.
I'll tell you what. After they took and told Texas they could not restrict abortion to take care of the mother, to make sure the mother would, if something terrible was happening, she would be taken care of physically. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if they don't start a movement in Texas.
The big question is, where are the feminists?
Yeah.
Where are they?
Because this concerns the rights of women to be treated in a medical facility that's held to hospital standards for a surgical procedure. And they're not complaining about that. They're more worried about the right to kill unborn children.
That's right.
Again, it's not rational, which is why I believe that it's supernatural.
People are evil if they want to save their babies. You've got to share your dream because it ties in where we were.
It's so strange, Jim. I mean, it's not the kind of thing that I ever thought that I would be talking about, but it became true. So I'm telling the truth. And I'm actually kind of embarrassed. I mean, because I don't think I'm a prophet, but I mean, the Bible does use dreams. God uses dreams. Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dream. Nebuchadnezzar, a pagan king, evil.
Yeah.
It was his dream. Daniel interpreted it, right? But God had a dream before Petrus Romanus was big, I had written one thing for Tom. It was a seminary paper. Actually, I kind of recycled it, sent it to Tom, and it was about Christian transhumanism. There were Christians promoting the idea of transhumanism, and Tom just was going to publish that in Pandemonium's Engine. And I wrote him a letter. Have you heard this prophecy of the Pope's thing? It's an email. And, it's just the next guy's life.
There you go, Brian. He just mentioned transhumanism. You're right.
Pope. Nobody's saying anything about it. What do you think about writing a book? And he had already mentioned it in Apollyon Rising, and I had read that. And the next thing you know, we start working on it, and I things just start falling in my lap that never existed before that nobody knew about. And it had to be God, because I'm not that good. But the dream I had, and Tom remembers it, and my wife Shelley remembers it, and I told them about it before it came to pass, is that I was working on television for Tom Horn on something like a newscast.
Wow.
I don't remember the details.
Wow.
I had no TV program or anything at that time.
I think I was probably sitting there with Derik.
I was just at your new studio.
You've got a huge we were announcing that we thought the end times had started. There was some kind of explosion or something happened, and we were celebrating actually because we thought Jesus was returning. Is the way the dream went, and I woke up, and I didn't think much of it. I told Shelley about it right when it happened, so she could verify that. We were sitting in the parking lot of Southwest Radio Church in a pickup truck, and I told Tom about it, and Tom looked at me and goes, "I'm not going to TV."
Oh, that's funny.
That was about the end of it. Then he did go to TV. Guess what? I just moved to Crane to work for Skywatch TV.
Right.
Okay, does that mean the rest of the dream's true?
God hadn't talked to Tom yet. That's all. He did though, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
But the point was, he saw himself working for Tom Horn,
Wow.
doing television, which we just hired him to do before I even had a studio or even land, was even thinking about building one. But the rest of the dream is apocalyptic.
It is.
Yeah. So both of you are talking about these explosions, and they're going to happen, people.
Yeah.
You read scripture, these massive events that take place, but it says here that you in the Mideast you saw something too. Is that at the same time in a dream?
That's Tom's, I think. In the middle, well, I've had dreams.
A mass explosion in the Middle East.
In the United States. I've had recurring dream of a nuclear explosion in the United States.
And Zach, we read that ISIS is determined to get a nuclear device.
Right.
They desperately, probably priority of their list.
Yeah, well,
They want to drop something that will have a big impact.
100%.
The bigger, the better.
Yes. And I mean, there are even some reports, I know that Tom knows this as well, that ISIS has even purchased a nuclear warhead from Pakistan. So we know that. And we also know that they have stolen some of the elements to make a dirty bomb as well. They have that right now in their possession. So when are they going to use it? We don't know. But they know. They have this day of jihad that many of our guests have been talking about for the last couple of years.
Right.
So
Okay, if they're right, what is Christians going to do if this kind of stuff happens? Because America will come to a halt.
Yeah.
yes.
We don't do bombing well in our country.
And so, I look right into the TV and say, that's the reason why, Jim, when you're telling people, get ready, get food, get a way of purifying water, get these basic things and have them, because the store shelves will be empty in 30 minutes.
That's right.
When this event
Not
happens.
30 hours.
And the grid goes down, it could be down, even our own government experts, even the pessimists are saying it could be 2 or 3 years trying to get the grid back. We have a God who gives us wisdom. We have a God who tells us how to prepare. When Joseph in Egypt, if they would not have listened, an awful lot of people in those nations would have starved to death.
Yeah.
But because they listened and because they set aside, they survived, and the nations around them survived. You said you've got people right now that are laughing at you. Well, I guarantee you a moment is coming when they're going to stop laughing.
Right.
And then they're going to want to know how to get a hold of you and find out if you can help them. But the people that are listening to you now, the ones that are doing it ahead of the event, they're going to thank God that you did it. That in spite of the fact that there might be mockers and whatever, there always have been mockers, right?
Yeah.
But in spite of that, you've done it anyway. I happen to know you're not being enriched by this, by the way.
That's right.
I happen to know that. If there's anybody out there thinking, yeah, Jim Baker's getting rich, well, they're just ignorant beyond belief, right?
Yeah.
Now, Tom, we've been talking about how you predicted in your book that ISIS, in the next year to 2 years maybe, would detonate some type of weapon of mass destruction somewhere in the world. Maybe Europe, maybe the United States. What will this trigger? There's a couple different things that you can talk about that it'll trigger. What are these trigger events?
Well, first of all, it's going to trigger what we already talked about. It's going to cause the Muslims to believe that their war is playing out according to their hadith. It's going to cause the Catholics to really start talking about the final Roman emperor. They're going to believe that it's a fulfillment of their apocalyptica. But there are some other things that I think could happen. In fact, the whole thing in Europe right now, these guys are more experts than I am. In fact, Derik's got degrees in economics, and I'm asking them back there, hey, if the European Union falls apart, it ultimately is going to be replaced by something else. And we know that in biblical prophecy, there is going to be this final kingdom on earth, if you will, that'll be headed by the Antichrist. So I was asking them, how do you see maybe something coming out of this? This trigger event is going to put a lot of pressure on the world's governments to create a kind of enforcement, an international enforcement agency that can protect the people of the world. People are going to be crying out for it, and they're going to be willing to lay down their rights to weapons, their rights to anything. If the other thing that we're looking at here is Brexit. They're also talking about abandoning the euro. Now, could this help the dollar? Could the dollar kind of resume its predominance around the world as, kind of the most stable? Yeah.
Okay, guys, this is 6 years old. We know now that Russia and China have signed, and Saudi Arabia have all signed up to pay their dollars with gold, with gold, not American dollars. So American dollars has lost its prime spot in the world financial system. It's on its way out.
It could, but we also know that the Antichrist is going to have an economic plan of his own by which no man will buy or sell, save he that hath the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Did you see all these articles just this last week? U.S. Navy discussed plans to fit humans with microchips and to track their every move. This is a vice admiral with 2 or 3 other members of the Navy meeting with Zoltan Ishpan, the transhumanist presidential candidate.
I don't understand why they want it. What's the Navy doing?
And by the way, I'm not even saying that microchipping humans will be the mark of the beast.
Brian, are you saying don't buy freeze-dried food? I bet that's because the water won't be safe.
I think it could be something more exotic, but it's the fact that we're moving to an era where people are talking about this now. They're ready to be branded. They're ready to be interconnected with artificial intelligence systems. Here's NBC News, microchipping children coming sooner than you think. Here's Fox News, are implanted chips the future of boarding passes? Students want to be implanted with microchips. Okay, so those articles go on and on. So just in case you want to do it, I brought an implantable RFID microchip.
No, I don't want this.
Yeah. And there's the device to implant it under your skin.
You can just buy that?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other part of this, which we're starting to see some calls for, if you watch, is that there are prominent economists who are calling for an end to cash, physical money.
Yes.
In fact, a number of high-powered bankers got together at a secret meeting at a hotel in Times Square a few weeks back to talk about developing a digital currency. And there are a couple of reasons for this. First of all, banks want to control all of our money, and they want to be able to start charging negative interest. So if you have money in the bank, they want to charge you for the privilege of holding your money. Mm-hmm. They're trying that in some countries now, but they've got to get us away from using folding money first. And so you'll see prominent people like the former Treasury Secretary, Lawrence Summers, say the only people who use $100 bills are tax cheats, criminals, and terrorists. Right. In the European Union, they banned the 500 euro note. They're going to get rid of it within a couple of years because the only people who use it are terrorists and people who don't want their transactions tracked. So the chip becomes essential if the only way you can move money from one place to another to buy or sell is if it's digital. And that move is coming. If you pay attention to the news, you'll see these stories pop up every now and again about how economists say in order to get the economy moving again, we need to get rid of cash. We need to make it all digital.
You're talking about ISIS has been asking, help to conquer Rome. I mean, that's pretty wild. ISIS wants to destroy Rome. Isn't that in some old prophecy? Didn't we talk about that?
Well, actually, there's several prophecies that talk about the destruction of Rome, including Catholic prophecies. The prophecy of the Pope ends with the destruction of Rome. The Fatima, which is one of their most celebrated apparitions, sees the Pope stumbling over bodies as these ISIS-like fighters run in and kill him. I mean, so yeah, I mean, that's the thing. The Roman Catholics also believe this. So in other words, we're not talking about something that is at odds with their belief system. We're talking about something that absolutely coalesces with some of their most ancient belief systems. But what this book does is say the real common denominator is we're really talking about the coming of the Antichrist. The Catholics are setting themselves up for the coming of a final Roman emperor or a great monarch who they think then is going to oppose the Antichrist. He's going to be the Antichrist. The Muslims, because he's going to unify the Muslim, Catholic, and Jewish religions. They're going to see him as their Mahdi.
You mentioned in your book, because I read it there somewhere, there's going to be a harvest of souls. There's going to be, in all this hell, there's going to be some sort of, like a revival, but it's going to be perilous times. I mean, there's just no doubt about what's coming.
Well, and it's not without precedent. When you were talking a moment ago, and Lori added, this is why we can rejoice, because we can see the positive side of everything that's happened. It all looks really dark right now, doesn't it? But when you study the history of Great Awakenings, every single one of them was at its darkest moment. Politically, economically, plagues, terrible stuff happening, and the church was asleep. And then a providential thing came along. Something started happening, and it was always something that God did, but it was God taking beauty out of ashes, God bringing strength out of weakness. It was always God reviving the remnant that was there, right? And so I liken this in the book to World War II, when at the end of World War II, the world became aware of the Holocaust. Back then we had television, but it wasn't really widely publicized. A lot of people didn't know much about it. A lot of people also don't know that there already was a Zionist movement, but it wasn't really going anywhere. Britain wasn't really behind it. The United States wasn't really behind this idea of pushing to get a nation state for Israel. But then World War II ended, and the world found out about the Holocaust. They saw the ovens. They saw Dachau. They saw Auschwitz. They learned of the millions and millions of Jews that had died in those horrible, terrible camps. And the heart of the world came out for Israel, right? All of a sudden, this whole Zionist movement got wings. It got, wind in its sails. The United States started pushing. Britain started pushing. Now, what happened? So,
Diane, that's what the Trump arrest is all about, detracting from the collapse of the banks. That's what they reckon it's about.
1948, Israel becomes a nation again officially. But guess what happened to the church that was snoozing at the time? The church that was asleep, they saw the birth of a nation in one day. They saw this as the fulfillment of the fig tree prophecy. And they knew that Jesus had said, when you see the budding of the fig tree, that generation will not pass away till all these things have been fulfilled. And the church suddenly woke up. It gave birth to what today we call the age of fire. You benefited from it. I benefited from it. All of the great preachers came along, from Billy Graham, and now you've got his kids on your program, right? And Catherine Kuhlman and Oral Roberts and A.A. Allen, who's, by the way, I gave testimonies in A.A. Allen's tent meetings years ago with R.W. Shambach. Remember that prairie preacher? It gave birth to the age of fire that literally swept the world, and literally millions and millions of people came to know the Lord. A little bit later, it happened again through the Jesus freak movement. What I'm saying is, there is going to be a catastrophic event, but it's going to cause the church to wake up. It's going to cause people to get serious. It's going to cause preachers, I think, to start preaching the gospel again. And I'm taking some heat for this, by the way, in that I'm saying there's also going to be a lot of women preachers. People don't like that. Some of my Baptist friends, oh, woman should keep. I'm telling you, this revival is going to have some of the most powerful preachers in the form of women who are going to unapologetically preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I think it's going to give birth to the greatest revival in the history of humanity, coming right out of the ashes of chaos.
Sons and daughters.
Yes.
Your handmaidens, that's woman, handmaiden.
Yeah.
You know, and it's there. It's there. And it's going to happen. And God is going to do, you know, God's going to use the unusual and the unused in the last days. On page 102. By the way, one of my cellmates is in your book.
Oh, yeah.
Did you know that?
Yes.
You didn't know? Yeah. A man who lived in the prison cell with me is in your book.
True.
On page 102. Yeah, he's twice in your book. And Lyndon H. LaRouche wrote in 1992, I'm just reading from your book. You might say that the World War III has already begun.
Right.
Because Freemason Albert Pike received a vision which he described in a letter that he wrote on August 15, 1871. Can you explain what this was in this letter?
I mean, Pope Francis has been going around talking about there's an ongoing Third World War. You know, Tom and I are looking at, is this the Vatican's last crusade? Because he's using all this language that sounds like he wants to start a war with ISIS in the name of Christianity almost. And a lot of Christians are being killed in Syria, and that's certainly true. But Pope Francis is articulating language that talks to the Catholic just war tradition that Thomas Aquinas started, and it's well known. We can tell that he means, you know, go fight ISIS. And you have the Pope saying that, that's a big deal. So it's moving us to globalism, right? Back to that same idea. And that's what LaRouche was talking about. And he said that these guys have a plan, and they're trying to move us to a global government. And it wasn't just him.
Tell you, is that what that is, that Bing thing? I had no idea what they were talking about.
Now, this Albert Pike, who he talks about, I think, and a Freemason,
right,
in 1871, right, gives the detailed predictions of 3 world wars.
Now, Jim, it's controversial. Some people have tried to debunk it, and the reason why is a fellow named Guy Carr wrote a book, Pawns in the Game. Now, he was a former Canadian intelligence officer, so he had some respect. He wasn't, you know, just some yahoo, but he believed that Mazzini, an Italian Freemason, had written a letter to the founder of Scottish Rite Freemasonry, Albert Pike. You know, they had a plan. They were going to start 3 world wars, and he goes on to describe in great detail the details of 2 of them that we've already experienced. I mean, he used words like, we're going to put the Zionists against the fascists for World War II. I mean, it's so obvious. And what was the purpose of that? To promote communism. So then the next war, we're going to put the Muslims against the Zionists again. And so you see this thing going on in Jerusalem, and you see that they want to use the Muslims to move the world toward a totalitarian state. Okay, now, I can't prove that letter's real, but there was a priest who wrote a book, copyright 1925, and he mentioned it. Okay, so if it was written after World War II, that wouldn't make any sense with it. How did that priest mention the letter in 1925? So that tells me there's something going on. There was something like it, and it might be that Guy Carr embellished a little bit. I can't prove that. There was an anti-Catholic kind of writer who made fun of all this, and he hammed it up a little bit. And Guy Carr believed him too much and quoted him like a real source. So people on the internet will say the whole thing's a joke because of that. But they don't really know about the Catholic priest who wrote the book, who actually they had the popes did the introduction for the book, so it wasn't just some little trivial Catholic book. It was taken quite seriously. And it was called The Mystery of Freemasonry Revealed. Okay, and you can get that book, and we have it on our bonus disc with the Final Roman Emperor, and you can look at it yourself. And he claims he saw that letter, and in that letter, we're right at the cusp of that third world war, if that is the plan. And the whole purpose is to move us to a global government.
We have been moving in one direction for a long time then. And I've never seen anything like what we're living in right now, worldwide. Europe is not the same place. You all been to Europe over your lifetime, I'm sure. It's just a different world. I just got one more thought. This exit has really upset some people. And the people that voted for it, they were thrilled. I mean, you could see they were dancing in the streets. They were happy. It was like a big load came off from them.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they were telling them to, what the temperature of their tea was going to be. I mean, did you hear this? I mean, and they weren't their tea and crumpets or something. They weren't going to give them any more.
Yeah, some of the regulations were simply ludicrous. Like the rule that you can't recycle a tea bag, or that children under 8 cannot blow up balloons, or the limits on the power of vacuum cleaners. The regulations were completely oppressive.
But that's, as Zach pointed out, that's why the cost to the UK for being a member of the EU was much higher than the benefit. It was it was putting a damper on the economy. And of course, then they were being expected as a member of the European Union to do what, let's be honest, to do what Germany wanted, which was to open up the borders and let people in. And the Brits have been seeing for years what, honestly, we're seeing here in the United States to some extent. It's not the same country that the people grew up in. It's not what they signed up for. So the prime minister there, David Cameron, a couple of years ago, who was facing pressure from this up and coming political party in the UK Independence Party, led by Nigel Farage, forced them really to having this referendum. It passed by a slim margin, about 52%, 48%. The thing is, it's not a binding referendum. Parliament could decide to ignore it. I don't think they will.
America wanted a change.
Well, and I think it's the same spirit that led to the vote in Britain getting out of the EU. And the reaction that we're seeing from the elites in Europe is similar to the reaction to the elites in the United States to the rise of Donald Trump. It's almost as though they were horrified to find out that the middle class could actually vote.
Right.
Yeah, what's going on with that elitist group? I'm watching some people who say they're Republicans, and they say they're going to vote for the Democratic Party. That doesn't sound like any Republican I ever knew.
No.
What is going on?
It's an agenda that isn't what they've been telling us it is. They want to keep the United States military engaged in wars that, to be quite honest, have no real benefit to the United States public. They want it because it keeps the money flowing. It's as President Eisenhower warned in his farewell speech, the military-industrial complex. And I think you could call it the military-industrial congressional complex because they have representatives who are doing a fine job in keeping the contracts going.
The profits from war.
Exactly. As General Smedley Butler, who was a Marine Corps hero, said back in the 1920s, war is a racket. And sadly, business is very good.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, guys, that's finished. I'll play one on Donald Trump. Diane sent me this link yesterday, guys. Reptilian Trump Scorpion King. Let's see what it's got to say.
This man in India worships Donald Trump like he's a god. He prays to him every day and even has a shrine in his honor.
Donald Trump, if you can hear us, please, Donald Trump, please save me. Please save me, Donald Trump, please. I'm asking you.
Yeah.
Please save me. Please save me. Please get these people away from me. In dear God's name, please stop this truth.
Okay, look at the coppers outside the car. They're going to arrest him, and he's praying to Donald Trump. Oh, man. Trump's about to get arrested too. It's probably a told on him. And the coppers arresting you, but probably a told on Trump, and they're going to arrest Trump.
Gilbert?
Hello, my friends. I'm Nathan Leal. The website is watchmanscry.com. Now, today, we're going to talk about the title of this program. You've seen it, Reptilian Trump, Scorpion King. If he gets into office, this is what's coming, folks. We will be in a dictatorship. The United States of America will crumble and turn into a monster. Babylon will rise, and Trump will show his real colors. He will be the little horn in the role of Nebuchadnezzar to set fire to the world. When we first saw Donald Trump show up, when he got inaugurated, he projected what he was going to do and the type of leader that he was going to be. During the first term, he projected that he was going to be a militant type of leader. From the very beginning of his presidency in 2016, he talked a lot about throwing people into prison, incarcerating his enemies and those who were disloyal to him. At his rallies, he would talk about beating up his critics, and he claimed that it was just hyperbole. But in his rhetoric, he was planting seeds. He was educating his followers and his supporters about the opposition. You folks remember that? You remember how he would label anybody who was against him or who he didn't like? He would label them with names. And the reason he did that is because it was a way to dehumanize the opposition.
Okay, there's no way Trump is like Samson. Samson had really long flowing hair. Trump looks like he's wearing a toupee. We know it's not, but that's a pretty expensive comb over. It's the most elaborate comb over I've ever seen. And he's got Kim Il-jung from North Korea's hairdresser.
Because if you dehumanize them and you call them names, then that means that they're the bad guys. And Trump has capitalized on that. He has energized and nourished this way of thinking in his supporters. And who are the bad guys? It was always a general term. You remember that, folks? The deep state this, the deep state that, or they were swamp creatures, and he was going to drain them.
Drain the swamp. Look at that sign. Drain the swamp in Washington, D.C. Look at that. You know, I said to somebody the other day, and even today, drain the swamp. We put it in about 2 days ago. I said, drain the swamp. I didn't like it. I didn't like the expression, drain the swamp in Washington. So I said it 3 days ago. The place went crazy. I said, you know what? I'm starting to like that expression. And now it's it's like trending all over the world. Drain the swamp in Washington. So we like that expression.
As his presidency progressed, he started telling us who they were, the FBI and the Justice Department and prosecutors and investigators who would look into his wrongdoing and his ethics violations and his crimes and his lies and all the things that make Donald Trump who he is. He is the Scorpion King, and he is a rising dictator. Now, back to what I was saying. Trump laid the foundation of who the bad guys and the enemies were. It was the FBI, the Justice Department, and anyone who disagreed with him. Fast forward to the present. Now, he's letting us know that Donnie 1.0 was the beginning phase, and it was just words. But Donnie 2.0 is where the hatchet comes down and the axe comes down, and he starts chopping off all the parts of government that would resist him. So the strategy that Donald Trump is going to use is to dismantle the United States government, the federal government. Well, what's wrong with that, Nathan? It's overreaching. It's bloated. The budget is too big. Yes, that's right. There's a lot of pork in the budget of the government, but the areas that he wants to shave are not about budgetary savings. He wants to shave off the departments that will stop him from being a dictator. That's the bottom line, folks. Trump 2.0 is going to dismantle the FBI if he gets in office. He's going to dismantle the Justice Department, the FBI, and also high-ranking officers in the military. He's going to get rid of any generals who will not obey him. colonels and others who won't make Trump their mafioso. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is a real and present danger occurring right now. Before he left office at the end of his presidency, he signed an executive order called Schedule F. Have you folks heard of that? And Schedule F allowed him to disembowel the government. With the swipe of his hand and a signature of his devil-horned autograph, it allows him to force tens and potentially hundreds of thousands of career officials to become political appointees. Instead of them having a job and tenure and job security and all of those benefits that most Americans like to have when they have a job, it allows him to switch them from civil employees to political appointees. Overnight, all of them become appointees of the president, which means when you're an appointee, the president can fire you on the spot. The job protections would be gone. In essence, it would allow Donald Trump to fire civil workers who failed the test to kiss his ring. Trump signed this executive order at the very end of his presidency, and then he left, and Biden came in and nullified it. But Trump has been letting us know that when he comes back, he's going to re-energize it, he's going to bring it back, and he's going to start chopping away at the departments of the government that would stop him from being a dictator. Folks, this is the same thing that Hitler did. And how interesting is it that he wants to get rid of the offices that have to do with judicial proceedings, meaning law and order? The Justice Department is the branch that has the teeth to enforce the rules that prevent us from being a banana republic or an anarchy. Without the Justice Department, we're a dictatorship because there is no one to challenge misbehavior. Folks, Trump does not serve America. He's not a public servant. And when he did the Waco rally just a few days ago, he made a comment. I don't know if it was a slip of the tongue or him letting us know who he.
Hello, Quiet Time with Jesus. Where does Prince Charles fit in with this? He's leading the way with the climate change stuff because he said there's a coming world leader that's going to need trillions of dollars to help climate change. But there's some who think he might be the Antichrist too. And I've shown Tim Cohen, I think it was, the Antichrist in a cup of tea, and he had a lot of good arguments that King Charles might actually be the Antichrist. I'm not saying he is, but he gave good arguments.
Really is in how he thinks of the position of president. Listen to what he says right here.
The whole place was laughing. They're laughing at our country. We don't want anyone to laugh. Nobody laughed at our country when I ran it, I can tell you that.
When I ran the country the first time, so he boasts that he would.
Bobby, don't turn on Trump, you said. Listen, I believe Trump got the election stolen. I completely believe that. But the fact is, he couldn't stop it being stolen as he's president. What hope has he got from out of office? So there's no point running again because they just steal the election. They got away with it already. So he's just conning everyone, I think.
Tony Soprano over America. How many folks out there are bothered by this rhetoric? A few days ago when he posted his social media message from Truth Social, it was an image of him holding a baseball bat and Alvin Bragg's was the other photo. He also released another tweet or a truther or whatever you call these things when they come from his Truth Social. He said right here, death and destruction is going to come if he gets indicted. This is his message. If I get indicted for doing illegal things, for committing crimes, then I'm going to send my little goons out there and we're going to burn down the city and people are going to die and there's going to be destruction. Folks, when in your lifetime do you ever remember any president talking like this? In America, at least. When have we ever seen this? We haven't. So we are in uncharted territory and Trump is stoking the fires and somebody is going to get killed with this insane rhetoric. This is happening in real time and I don't hear a lot of people talking about it. So on this program, we're going to talk about it because great darkness has arrived and there's a lot of bills that are waiting to be passed, like the TikTok bill, the restriction bill, or it's also known as Senate Bill 686 to restrict TikTok. But if we read the fine print of that bill, it's not just about TikTok. It will strip the freedom of speech and the freedom to get online, the freedom to go on the internet, the freedom to privacy from every American out there, every one of us. The TikTok bill is a bill to allow them to listen in on your phone. It allows them to tap into the routers of any house, a private house, and listen to the phone. It removes all the barriers of the Constitution. I don't understand. I really, really don't understand how more people aren't talking about this. This is, at the moment, Satan's world, And when Jesus returns, he's going to take it back. But until then, Satan is going to be allowed to wreak havoc on the inhabitants of earth. And folks, it's not going to be only the Democrats that are doing this. The architects of the dictatorial laws in waiting are being written by the Republicans, by the conservatives, by the quote unquote supposed evangelicals, by the people that your preacher voted for. And who would have thought that America was going to fall from the inside? But this is the great betrayal, and it's occurring right now. The spirit of the Judas goat is hovering over the earth. It is killing the souls and the discernment and the spiritual eyesight of so many people. There's a huge spiritual operation right now in America to turn us into a dictatorship. And folks, the number one candidate to make this happen right now is Donald Trump. Look at these pictures. These messages are not the messages of a Christian or of a nobleman or of someone who has any business being a public servant or being in office, and in no way to be the president, because Trump is a malignant psychopath, narcissist. And when he comes back, should he succeed, he's going to want blood, folks. He's going to want revenge, and he's going to bring a scorched earth policy to burn down the government, to burn down America, to bring civil war. And if those incubating satanic eggs that are in the MAGA movement hatch, then MAGA will become the new Nazi party of America that is going to spread through the whole world.
In 2016, I declared, I am your voice. Today I add, I am your warrior. I am your justice. And for those who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution. I am your retribution.
You notice how many times he said I am then? That's very suspicious. I am, I am, I am. Wow. Let's hear that again.
Down the government, to burn down America, to bring civil war. And if those incubating satanic eggs that are in the MAGA movement hatch, then MAGA will become the new Nazi party of America that is going to spread through the whole world.
In 2016, I declared, I am your voice.
One.
Today I add, I am your warrior.
Two.
I am your justice.
Three.
And for those who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your
Four.
retribution. I am your retribution.
Five.
How can I let this happen?
5 times he just said I am. 5 times. Wow. You all know who the real I am is, don't we?
Why would I do this? Why in the world would I say such a thing that Donald Trump is the Scorpion King? Well, it's because the antics of Donald Trump right now are back on the headlines, and he's affecting a lot of people. And all of his supporters in the NAR crowd, the Kingdom Now, Seven Mountain crowd, are now coming out of their hibernation, and they are spewing the same garbage, the same lies, and the same nonsense of delusion and deception from Satan to God's people. The showmen, the carnival, the graduates of P.T. Barnum's class of deception are doing their job to dismiss the Bible, to step on righteousness, and take more prisoners for the enemy. And if Trump is successful in what he is trying to do, he is proving himself to be the Scorpion King. He is proving himself to be a child of the serpent, a reptilian of the spirit world. And when I say reptilian, I'm not talking about DNA manipulation, although that might be something that we don't even know about. But when I say reptilian Trump, I'm talking about the spirit of Satan and the spirit of the serpent, the adder that resides within him. Up front, ladies and gentlemen, I am not a Biden supporter. I'm not a Democrat. I do not follow the liberal progressive thinking. I never have. And for those of you that would type in the comments, Nathan, how come I never hear you talk about Biden? Well, in the last probe.
Okay, Brian, you know who prayed over Trump? I saw Kenneth Copeland in the White House praying over Trump. I saw Paula White praying over Trump. If you're a real Christian, you'll go nowhere near them two. He's not a real Christian, mate. He's just not.
And there were a few people who typed that, which was interesting because I actually did talk about Biden, and I said the same thing I'm saying now, but they still typed in the comments, you never talk about Biden, you're a progressive. So let's talk about Biden. And let me answer the question of why I do not find it necessary to talk about Biden. Now, first of all, this program is not a political program, ladies and gentlemen. It is a spiritual, biblical program. I have an end-time worldview according to what we read in the Bible. according to the gospel of Jesus and what he has given us in his word, the prophecies that we find in the Old Testament as well as the New. So I'm an end-time Christian, a pastor, and according to the Bible, we need to be watching and making sure that we are not falling for deception. Key word, ladies and gentlemen, deception. So when I see someone who is causing deception, I do a show about it and talk about it and shine the light and tell the people, danger. I did that during the Lakeland revival in 2008. I did it way back then. I have done it about Obama here and there, and I did it about Donald Trump, about deception. That's the key word. Not only deception, but deception that looks like the truth. Deception that looks like facts. Deception that looks like reality. That's the type of deception that really gets a hold of people and throws them off. Now, when it comes to Joe Biden, how many of you out there are really, really tempted by the antics of Joe Biden? How many of you find yourself wanting to imitate him? And for those of you men out there who are saying, how come you don't talk about Biden? Well, what is it about Joe Biden that is causing deception in the church? And what antics is Joe Biden doing that's making people want to imitate him, that's throwing them off? And therefore, I have to warn the Christians out there not to behave like Joe Biden. Please inform me of the activities of Joe Biden right now that Christians are wanting to imitate and are making excuses for. Please tell me, what are they? Because the only ones I can think of are his progressive stuff, and most Christians aren't going to just come out and follow that. So that one's a no-show. But then we do have the video clips through the years of Joe Biden cozying up to young girls. He smells their hair when he has a photo opportunity with them. He gets close to them and hugs them. And so here's a question that I have for you, my friend. Is that something that I need to talk about and say that Christians should not be doing? Do I need to say from this microphone,
no, you don't know. We know.
Proper behavior to go up to little girls who are young and smell their hair if you're a man? So is that a problem that some of the folks out there have that are listeners? To those of you that would type that in my comment section, Nathan, why don't you talk about Biden? So let me ask you, do I need to talk about Biden doing these things because you struggle with it? You probably shouldn't be smelling little girls' hair like Joe Biden does. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Now, what else is there? Well, Joe Biden is senile. He forgets his words. He forgets his lines. So for those of you who might be doing that, if you're doing it like him, welcome to getting old, because that's his ailment. He's old. He's forgetful. And those of us who are older, we know that. So to make fun of that and use it as a political tool to rip apart the Democrats and Biden, and, you know, folks, we're all going to get old. And it's pretty sad that there are Republicans out there that are making fun of Biden for forgetting things. Because what purpose does it serve? Everybody gets old, and every one of us are going to lose our memory at some point. It will start going away, and then we'll die. You will die someday, my friend. If Jesus doesn't come, you will die. If you make it to old age, you're going to get old, and there's a chance you're going to become forgetful, just like Biden. And when that happens, how many of you want other Christians who claim to love Jesus and go to church and say grace over their food? How many of you want them making fun of you for acting old? So that's just dumb, ladies and gentlemen. The behavior of the Republicans right now is so embarrassing. And why is it happening? It's because the Scorpion King recruited them. So when it comes to Joe Biden, if Joe Biden asks you to storm the Capitol, you need to resist that temptation. All right, my friend? Is there anything else? Well, yeah, Nathan, the laptop. There's a bunch of corruption. Tell us about the laptop. Okay, let's sum it up this way, ladies and gentlemen. Joe Biden allegedly made some deals with his son and benefited from it. And if this is all true, it was bad, it's evil, and it goes against principles. Because taking advantage of the political office for financial gain is a bad thing. However, right now, guess what's happening, folks? We have these committee meetings going on in Congress against the CEO
Okay,
of
Kelly,
TikTok.
good night.
And if you saw the footage of that interrogation or tribunal is what it really looked like, the questions they were asking were silly, they were stupid, and they revealed that these politicians don't know what they're talking about and that they're bought and paid for, because it has also come to the light that Mark Zuckerberg has invested tens of millions of dollars into lobbying groups to get Congress to delete TikTok from your phone. Zuckerberg is behind it, and Meta is behind it, and also Alphabet Incorporated, or Google, is behind it. And out of the 52 Congress people who were grilling the CEO of TikTok, out of 52 of them, the majority of them have stock shares in Google, in Instagram, in Facebook, in Meta, and other high-tech companies. Did you know that, folks? That's why they want to get rid of TikTok, so that people will then flood Instagram and Facebook. However, it's backfiring because Generation X is very angry about this, and they're the largest demographic in social media. And the Republicans who are doing this, if any Democrats or Republicans get rid of TikTok, here are the numbers. 150 million Americans use TikTok. That's almost half of America uses TikTok. 5 million Americans have businesses on TikTok. A lot of people have their incomes on TikTok. There's people who have ministries on TikTok. Half the country is not going to be happy with this. And if it does happen, they're cutting their own throat. The Democrats, as well as the Republicans who are behind this, are going to get booted out in the upcoming elections. But it's because they're bought and paid for. They've done insider trading. They bought a lot of stocks several months ago getting ready for this. And these Congress people have committed open insider trading, which is against Securities and Exchange ethics. But that's where we are, folks. We're in the age of corruption. So in answer to the question of why I do not talk about Biden, there it is. Now, back to this image right here.
Okay, Brian. Yeah, I actually think the royal family's reptilian, so I'm on board there. I don't know if you think that, but I literally think they're reptilian.
Donald Trump, the Scorpion King. Why did I say it? Here's why, folks. Because something is going on right now in the United States of America, and it is going on in the spiritual realm, and it is going on in the timeline of prophecy. On these programs, we talk about Bible prophecy a lot. We talk about the book of Revelation. We look at the end time prophecies about the day of the Lord, his vengeance. We have looked into the rapture, the abomination of desolation, the Antichrist, the little horn, the players, the beast, the spiritual entities and principalities who will fuel the beast, and the religious beast, the false prophet, second beast. We've talked about a lot of those things. And over the last several decades, I have been searching and seeking God and asking him, what do we need to look for? Because I've always maintained, and I've said this openly, that the way that the end times is going to play out is not what we were told by Hal Lindsey and John Hagee and all those prophecy books. Yes, Jesus is coming. Yes, we're in the last days. Yes, Revelation is unfolding. The horsemen are riding. And we are at the beginning, opening credits of the tribulation. Not the great tribulation yet, folks. We're not there for the mark of the beast, but we are in the opening credits. So I have been seeking God to find out what we need to look for. And the biggest thing is deception. And throughout the New Testament, Paul tells us it's going to be deception, delusion. So it's about a spirit that is going to try to deceive people. Before the fireworks start, deception is the first rule. That means betrayal is also involved, because deception is a betrayal of trust. And when we look at what happened to Jesus, you folks remember the Last Supper? He had a lot of final words. A lot of the final words are recorded in the last chapters of the book of John. It's beautiful, his prayer and his promises and the comfort that he gave the disciples, but also for us. And he prayed for them, but also for us. And during that beautiful moment, when he was saying his goodbye, there was also a dark moment where Judas got activated. Judas Iscariot. Jesus said, one of you will betray me. Peter asked, is it I, Lord? And Jesus said, whoever I dip this bread. And so he did it, and he gave it to Judas. And then he said to Judas, what you do, do quickly. That's found in the book of John, chapter 13. And from that moment, John 13:27 tells us, at that moment, Satan entered into Judas. And then Jesus said, what you do, do quickly. So Satan went into Judas to betray him. But it didn't just start there, because we can see it a few verses earlier in verse 2, John 13:2. It says Satan was already influencing his heart. John 13:2, and supper being ended, the devil having already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him. So Satan put it in his heart. It was birthed by Satan. The deception started with him, and then he entertained it, and then he did it. He left and went and did it. Now, when we think about Judas, most of us think that Judas is like the villain who wore a mask and he was the bad guy and he appeared bad and always evil and dark and conniving. But according to what we read in the Gospels before the great betrayal, Judas was just one of the others. He hung out with him. They laughed together. They ate with him. They got along with him. They allowed him to be the treasurer. He held the money. And when Jesus sent them out 2 by 2, which is told to us in Matthew 10, it says that Judas also was among them. That's in Matthew 10, verse 4. Judas was among them, going out 2 by 2, and they came back and said, Lord, even the demons are obeying us. We healed the sick and did miracles and all this stuff. So Judas also participated in miracles. He wasn't just the villain always walking around looking like the bad guy. He looked like one of them. He looked like he belonged amongst them. So when he betrayed Jesus, the others were very, very surprised. Now, fast forward to our time. If Jesus got betrayed and the Christians around Jesus didn't even know who the betrayer was, and they trusted the betrayer, but they also had a front row seat to the teachings of Jesus, but they still believed Judas and they were caught off guard by Judas. What does that say for us? For those of us who don't have front row seats to the words of Jesus, and we can't talk to him personally, one-on-one in the physical realm and touch him and hold his hand and lean our head on his breast like Peter did in the Last Supper, since we don't have that privilege, how much more so can the church be deceived even more than they were? And Jesus says that. He says in Matthew 24, that would be one of the things that was happening. People will betray one another. Family members will betray one another. So if family members will betray one another, then how much more will a non-family member? How much more will someone that doesn't even know you? How much more will a politician or a rich man or somebody who behaves like Donald Trump? Of course he will, folks, and he's doing it right now. So back to the Scorpion King. I challenge everyone that is listening to this program to please listen to this program in its entirety, because I'm going to share some things. I'm going to give some information that you need to know. The people of God need to know. And if you happen to be a Trump follower or a MAGA follower or a QAnon follower, I challenge you to listen to this program in its entirety, because I'm going to give information to prove that Donald Trump is making a laughingstock out of all of you who are loyal supporters. He's making a joke out of you. It's sad that I have to say this. I don't want to have to say this, but that's what Trump is doing right now. Truth Social has been funded by Russian oligarchs and money laundering funds, and it has also been funded by the porn industry. Yes, that's right, folks. Truth Social, the app that Christian MAGA followers, they don't know this, and if you happen to have a Truth Social account, you should know this. They have been funded by a bank that serves the pornography industry. This is the real truth. Donald Trump is a vessel in a cauldron that invents lies and spits out lies. It's like a foam, a dark foam that comes out of his mouth. He's a cauldron of lies. But sadly, a lot of people don't see it. A lot of MAGA people don't realize it when he's lying, and they don't seem to be bothered with the things that he is saying. They don't seem to be bothered that Donald Trump is now calling for assault, attacks, for physical attacks, even assassination of some of the district attorneys, judges, and lawyers and investigative prosecutors who are working on behalf of the state of New York or some of the jurisdictions that deal with ethics violations. Donald Trump placed this on his Truth Social. And look what it says here, folks. Look at this picture right here. Trump put that out. And the person on the right is District Attorney Alvin Bragg. But on the left, Donald Trump is showing himself holding a baseball bat. And then he also tweeted this: everybody knows I'm 100% innocent. Well, no, not everybody does know that. You're not innocent, Trump. You're guilty. But he says, everybody knows I'm 100% innocent, including Bragg, the DA. But he doesn't care. He is just carrying out the plans of the radical left lunatics. Our country is being destroyed as they tell us to be peaceful. Folks, he's doing it again. He is inciting violence. He is inciting destruction and riots and mayhem. As they tell us to be peaceful, hint, hint, wink, wink, everybody. We don't need to be peaceful now. Here's your excuse to go burn down the city. So according to this post right here, let's look at what Trump said right here, because this is stupid, ladies and gentlemen. This is how dumb Trump is. He claims innocence when we know he's not innocent. And he says everybody knows. No, not everybody knows it. So those are two lies. You're not innocent, and not everybody believes that you are. So that's two lies. And then he says Bragg knows he's innocent. No, Bragg knows you're guilty, Trump, because they have the evidence, they have the paper trail, they have the sworn testimony. And Michael Cohen went to prison for the very thing that you're saying you're innocent of. But then he says they're doing this because they're left-wing lunatics. So because Donald Trump had an affair on his wife when she was pregnant and then paid her off before the election, Stormy Daniels, so I'm talking about, because he did that and then claimed that they were lawyer fees, which was a lie. So it wasn't just a bookkeeping error. It was outright fraud. And when it comes to ethics and political contributions, the rules are very strict because we have seen too much corruption. So they have made it that as long as the politician is honest and accountable, there won't be any problem. But when the politician becomes corrupt and deceptive and tries to hide dereliction of duty, then they're going to say something. And that doesn't mean that the country's being destroyed. So in a nutshell, here's what we have, folks. Donald Trump paid off Stormy Daniels. He used Michael Cohen to do it, $130,000. And then he reimbursed Michael Cohen. But that went against campaign finance laws and ethics. And because he got caught, he's trying to say that this is the destruction of America. When, nope, it's not. Let's move on. Why won't Bragg drop this case? Everybody says there's no crime here. No, they're not. I did nothing wrong. Folks, do you see it? It was all made up by a convicted nutjob with zero credibility who has been disputed by highly respected professionals at every turn. Actually, no, Michael Cohen has the paperwork. He has the receipts. So it's not made up. And by the way, regarding that it was all made up and he didn't do this, I'm going to show you something in a second, but let's finish reading. Bragg refuses to stop despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. He is a Soros-backed animal who just doesn't care about right and wrong, no matter how many people are hurt. Now he's called
Biden sold you out to China as well.
Bragg an animal. He's dehumanizing Alvin Bragg, which is giving fuel to all the radical MAGA people out there to do harm against Bragg because it's not so bad if he's an animal, right? But Donald Trump fails to include the information that he himself borrowed money from George Soros to finish one of his skyscrapers in Chicago. This was back in 2004 when Trump needed $160 million for a mezzanine loan to help him finish the project. And one of the investors was George Soros's hedge fund. You can look it up yourself. You can search it out. If you're a MAGA Trump supporter and you're saying, "Nuh-uh, Nathan," all you need to do is type it in. George Soros funded Donald Trump's Chicago project. Does that mean Donald Trump is also an animal as well? Does that mean that we can apply the same logic and rationale of identification politics to Donald Trump as well? You see, folks, the hypocrisy runs great with this guy. This is no legal system. This is the Gestapo. This is Russia and China, but worse, it's disgraceful. So again, Donald Trump caught, but he says, "I did nothing wrong. There's no crime here. It was all made up." So he's saying that he never did this. He didn't give the money. But look what we have here, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm giving you a fact now that you don't know. It's not campaign money. No campaign finance violation.
Rudy Giuliani said Wednesday night that President Trump reimbursed his personal attorney, Michael Cohen, for a $130,000 payment Cohen made to keep adult film star Stormy Daniels quiet 11 days before the election.
Funneled through over him, and the president repaid it. Oh, I didn't know he did. Yeah.
That contradicts what the president said on Air Force One last month.
Did you know about the $130,000 payment for Stormy Daniels? Why did Michael Cohen make this if there was no further allegation?
You have to ask Michael's my attorney, and you'll have to ask Michael.
Do you know where he got the money to make that payment?
No, I don't know.
When I heard Cohen's retainer of $35,000 when he was doing no work for the president, I said, "That's how he's repaying. That's how he's repaying it."
Daniels' lawyer, Michael Avenatti, said Giuliani's remarks could possibly indicate bank fraud or money laundering.
Rudy Giuliani, based on what I've just seen, stated that there were bogus law firm bills. Well, guess what? That's fraud. That's illegal.
See, folks, when you're a liar, it's hard to keep up with the lies because every now and then you can forget and oops. Now, in addition to
Okay, guys, I think that's enough on Trump. I might show Little Light Studios' take on the Marvel franchise. Where is it? There it is.
I use Miro pretty much every day.
For brainstorms, mind maps, flowcharts. Miro.com.
Planet of Outlaws. What master do you serve? Master do I serve? What am I supposed to say? Jesus?
When the earth starts to settle, God throws a stone at us.
Hear me and rejoice.
Upon this rock, I will build my church.
You have had the privilege of being saved by the great Titan.
How is humanity saved if it's not allowed to evolve?
We're fulfilling prophecy.
I hate this prophecy.
In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, who is portrayed as the enemy of our souls? I am Brainiac.
Hey everybody, welcome to LED Live, where we are going to expose some darkness with the light of Christ. And you guys aren't going to want to miss this one because we're going to talk about the Marvel Universe and their end game. And if you're a Christian, I believe that there is a reason why the world has totally become obsessed with this movie. $1.2 billion in its opening weekend is out of control.
Find out on this episode of LED Live.
You should get their volume right.
Exposing darkness. All right, you guys, have you ever seen a Marvel film?
Probably.
Yes.
You probably have. Okay,
My
I've seen some of the Marvel films. Yeah, right. It's been a long time since I've seen it. But, you know, I think that they were brilliant in the way that they were literally roping together all of these stories and collecting sort of audiences in each one of the categories and then converging them all together in a final story. I mean, it was just a brilliant idea for a company.
Yeah, kind of like a flavor for everybody. Yeah, you're gonna identify one of these comic characters, probably, right?
Exactly, exactly. Do you guys remember from Replacement Gods 1 when we had the artist that was talking with Grant Morrison, and he basically said, listen, this is a recreation of the Bible?
Yeah.
You guys remember that? I really believe there's a reason why we're seeing so many biblical references, and I mean, it's pretty shocking when you kind of wrap your head around it. So I'm excited to present this for you guys.
Me too.
Let's see what you think. All right. All right. So in order to kind of basically wrap your head around this, we're going to go all the way back to 10 years ago, the very first Iron Man. Now, there's a lot of parallels that Iron Man actually has, biblical parallels that almost kind of pin him as the savior. You guys will check this out. There's even comments that are made in the film that are directly taken from the Bible, such as this one.
Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar. There you go.
Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar, which is a line that's directly taken from
Jesus Christ.
From Jesus, right? So here it is in Matthew 22:21. It says, they said unto him, Caesar's. And then he said unto them, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. So this is when Jesus was getting confronted with the Pharisees, and they were asking him, you know, who do we pay our money to? And he quotes this exact line. So I found that kind of interesting. Yeah, there's another scene here where in the very beginning of the movie, Tony Stark is describing how his company is really a company that's making weapons to destroy large entities. And he titles this one with a biblical name.
For your consideration, the Jericho.
As you can notice, he holds his arms out in sort of a Christ-like pose, right? Now, who destroyed Jericho? Was that the devil? No, that was Jesus, right? So there's this parallel here once again with him being like a Christ type. When he became Iron Man, this is the first time that he like almost dies, literally, and they take him to a cave, and that's where they put that little thing on his chest, and which saves his life. And here's him inside of the cave.
I've seen many wounds like that in my village. We call them the walking dead.
So he makes a reference that he's like the Walking Dead, which is another Christ-like type reference, right? But he's in the cave for 3 months, becoming Iron Man, right? And he comes out of the cave literally blowing people away and destroying them, right? So we start to see now a stark contrast of, if this is really like a Christ type or a savior of the world, is that really something that Jesus would do, right? Come out of the cave and start destroying life? The Bible says this in John 10:10, that a thief cometh not, but to steal and to kill and to destroy. I am come that they might have life and that they might have it more abundantly. The very purpose of Jesus was not to hurt and destroy people. In fact, he spent most of his time running around healing people and helping them, right?
Right.
When you analyze the comic books, there is some references even in the comic drawings that he's just like Jesus. In fact, this is Tony Stark here. And as you notice, he's in a very Jesus-like pose. This is actually a sculpture of Jesus and Mary.
Yeah, that's not a coincidence.
It's not a coincidence. And I even took the comic book here and overlaid it. I mean, look at this. He's even literally in the exact same pose. That is purposeful.
That's what I was noticing. Her hand gesture is identical.
Identical. So I believe that this is definitely purposeful to make him like a Christ type, right? But the bad guy in the movie, as we start to uncover who these bad guys are that all the Marvel universe is always fighting against, guys that want to take over the world or that want to destroy the entire world or half the universe, right? They have a lot of similarities to God or God's government. So the bad guy in the first Iron Man, his name is Obadiah.
I don't want to buy a captive to be our only
That's
legacy.
what we do. We're ironmongers. We make weapons.
My name on the side of the building.
And what we do keeps the world from falling into chaos.
So basically, the bad guy, Obadiah, says what we do for a living is try to prevent the world from falling into chaos, right? By destroying things with these weapons that are called the Jericho weapons and stuff, right? Now, when you look at Obadiah Stane, Obadiah is actually Hebrew for slave of God. The biblical theophorical name means servant of God or worshiper of Yahweh. Now, I find that really interesting that the bad guy is literally the servant or slave of God. And the Bible talks about Jesus as being the servant of God, right? Isaiah 42:1, this is a prophetic interpretation of Jesus. Behold my servant whom I uphold, my elect in whom my soul delighteth. I have put my spirit upon him, and he shall bring forth judgment to the Gentiles. So I think that is not by chance that they named him literally servant of the Lord. So let's move to Iron Man 2, okay? So in order for this to be a true statement to basically say that they're literally warring God against the devil, but they're kind of flipping the model around, there has to be consistency throughout all of them. Wouldn't you agree? So it's not like just one film that you're going to notice this. We've got to see this thing throughout a lot of different films. In Iron Man 2, here he is. They're once again giving you the imagery that Tony Stark is sort of a Christ type, and here he's offering to save the world through the means of peace. He's in a court scene, and he's being questioned in front of the judge. I mean, Jesus was in court being questioned in front of the judges too, and we know that Jesus is called the Prince of Peace, right? So listen to this scene.
We're safe. America is secure. You want my property? You can't have it. But I did you a big favor. I have successfully privatized world peace.
So here he is bringing world peace. That's kind of his mission. In fact, same mission that Jesus had. You have heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those that curse you, do good to those that hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, right? Jesus was the Prince of Peace. He came to really share how we were supposed to live peacefully.
So
Now,
if the enemy is like God, and the good guys like Jesus, that seems like a good thing, right?
Right. So on the surface, when you watch these and you kind of recognize, okay, there's some Jesus type parallels, but when you really analyze his character is totally different than Jesus, right? He's totally this rich narcissist. Was Jesus rich?
No.
Did he come to the earth in all of his wealth? No way. So who is the rich one in the world that can promise you anything, right? So even though he's set up to be like Jesus, that's more of an antichrist type character. So here the bad guy in here, Ivan, you can see things written on the wall. It says Tony Stark is here to save the world. And Ivan is here talking about Tony Stark. Listen to what he says.
If you could make God bleed, people will cease to believe in him.
So he says, if you could make God bleed, people will cease to believe in him, right? But that's kind of the whole angle that the Iron Man 2 is taking. He's trying to hurt Tony Stark and Iron Man. Here's the picture. Tony Stark is here to save the world. Once again, that imagery we see popping through.
That's what's fascinating about that statement he just made is God did bleed, you know? And instead of people not believing in him, people believe in him because of that.
Right. So this scene right here, Ivan is in prison. Tony Stark comes to visit him in prison, which I think is very interesting. And the dialogue that happens back and forth really kind of starts to begin to show you a picture of who the Iron Man really is.
You come from a family of thieves and butchers. And now they're all guilty men. Try to rewrite your own history. And you forget all the lives the Stark family has destroyed.
Speaking of thieves, where did you get this design?
My father. I'm Tom, uncle.
I never heard of him.
My father is the reason you're alive.
So it's very interesting that he says he came because of his father, and Tony Stark goes, I've never heard of him before. And he goes, my father is the reason you're alive. Now, can the devil make that statement? No, he cannot, right? In fact, the very reason all life exists is because God allows it, right?
Satan wants to destroy it all.
Right? And he says to Tony Stark, you come from a family of thieves and murderers, right? You can't make that comment towards God. He's not a thief, right? The devil's known as the thief. So there's some imagery here that really he has some sort of Christianity in sort of a twisted, bent way. He wears a Maltese cross. He has these whips, and he looks like he's been whipped himself.
White bird on
his name is, yeah, White Bird on his shoulder, right? Very interesting, kind of like the Holy Spirit, right? Long hair. I mean, there's some parallels here that are very strange. Now, John 8:44 says, you belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning. So they're twisting your idea and perception of who's who in the story. But listen to how Tony Stark gets psychologically analyzed, and listen to how they describe him. He's reading his analyzation of himself.
Mr. Stark displays textbook narcissism.
So he displays textbook narcissism, right? You can't attribute that to God. God is so others focused. In fact, he loved the world so much, he gave his son to die for those that don't even care about him, right? The opposite of narcissism. It's the devil that's narcissistic. So let's talk about Iron Man 3. In the storyline of Iron Man 3, and when they play the trailers for you, they don't show you exactly who the bad guy is. So they set it up that this particular character that Ben Kingsley played is the bad guy. And so the voice that you hear is going to be his voice. Listen to how he addresses people and see if this rings any Christian alarm bells.
Ladies, children, sheep.
Some people call me a terrorist. I consider myself a teacher.
So he addresses people as ladies, children, sheep, right? Those are all names that Jesus uses to describe our relationship with him, right? We are the bride of Christ. We are his sheep, and we are literally children of God, right? And he says, some people consider me to be a teacher, right? Jesus was a teacher. So there's some strange parallels with him and Christianity. Now, in this second trailer that they put out for this movie, there are flashing scenes that's happening all throughout the movie. And the camera flashes through a scene where you see this character that Ben Kingsley plays. He raises his arms up in the air. And so I went back and I paused it and I looked at what says on his robe, because every time something is written on the screen, that tells me that sometimes a director had to make a decision. Hey, write that on there. No words are going to automatically.
They didn't go to a store and buy this.
That's right. That's right. So this is actually made. So if you'll notice right here, what does it say right here? Redeemed through blood. Who's redeemed through blood? We are, right? That's something that describes our salvation through Jesus, really. And they're putting this on the bad guy, and he's got his arms outstretched like in a Christ-like pose. We are redeemed through blood. And in fact, the Bible has lots to say about this. Ephesians 1:7 says, in whom you have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins, and according to his riches and grace. And Isaiah 44:22 says, I have swept away your offenses like a cloud, your sins like the morning mist. Return unto me, for I have redeemed you. I think it's beautiful that we are redeemed through Christ, you know, but they're painting him as he's the evil one, right? But the twist in Iron Man 3 is this isn't even really the real bad guy. In fact, they put him as an actor who's in prison, but he's really just an actor. He's not even like a real bad guy. So it's almost like even just another little jab at God, like, oh yeah, you came into this criminal world, but you're not really, you know, a sinner, and you're not really a bad guy. I find that is kind of an interesting parallel. But all of these guys that are in prison, they want to hear him do his like little dark voice that he always does. So listen to this scene and see if you see any Christian parallels with this.
Me and the boys was just wondering if you could do the voice.
Fletcher, it's not something I would just turn on. I'm not your meat puppet. Oh, very well. And you will never see me coming.
Wow.
Thief in the night.
Right? Wow. Thief in the night, seriously. And he's talking to other criminals. You know what I mean? And one thing that's kind of interesting is when I actually was looking for this up in the internet, just so you can find this clip, they titled this clip "Hail to the King." And I think that in the film they actually even call him the King, which is very interesting.
It's probably the name of the chapter on the DVDs.
Exactly. So let's talk about Thor, okay? So moving on, different one. We showed this in Replacement Gods 2, so this will be just kind of a little bit of a refresher. You guys have probably seen this before, but this scene is a scene between Thor and his father. And this is when, the very beginning, when they introduce Thor to the world. Listen to the language that they use even here.
I have sacrificed much to achieve peace. For through your arrogance and stupidity, you have opened these peaceful realms and innocent lives to the horror and devastation of war. You are a vain, greedy, cruel boy. You are no man and a fool! You're unworthy! Father, I now take from you your power. I cast you out!
Wow.
Please open your eyes.
Oh no, this is
Where did it come from?
So what do you guys notice right off the bat?
It's just like Satan.
Just like Satan, right? He's having a conversation with his father in heaven. His father says, you're the vain, greedy, cruel boy who traded peace for war. Well, who's the epitome of vain, greed, cruelty, that literally traded peace for war, was cast down to earth in a bolt of lightning, right? Do you remember the story when Jesus was talking with the disciples, and the disciples all came to him and they said, yes, we have power over the demons and we can cast them out, right? Do you remember that story? And Jesus goes, no, don't gloat at that. Don't be excited about that, because he says in Luke 10:18, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. That's why the devil's always described as this bolt of lightning, AC/DC, bolt of lightning. You know, the devil's children always kind of describe their occult through a bolt of lightning. It's because of this verse. So in Thor Ragnarok, there's a very interesting scene. Once again, we see some crazy parallels.
It's come to my attention that you don't know who I am.
To God, Jesus. The bad guy in this case is Thor's sister.
I am Hela, Odin's firstborn, commander of the legions of Asgard.
Now I want you to observe something right off the bat. Look at her crown. It is literally in the design of a crown of thorns.
Go back to whatever cave you crept out of, you evil demons.
And there's this scene where she is walking back into her throne room. Thor is sitting on the throne. You can see this crown of thorns going back into her head. And she has this very interesting dialogue with Thor. Check this out.
It seems our father's solution to every problem was to cover it up.
Or to cast it out.
I find it very interesting that she's literally saying our father's way of dealing with things is to just cover it up. But see, that's what God does. God's atoning blood through Jesus Christ covers our sins. And listen to what Thor says.
Or to cast it out.
We already saw that he was the one cast out, which is a representation of Lucifer. I want to point something out right here. If you notice that the symbol in the ground where she is standing is the symbol of the Trinity, you see it on a lot of Bibles. That was put here on purpose, not by mistake.
And then, one day, he decided to become a benevolent king, to foster peace, to protect life.
The fact that she's saying that her father, the one that cast Thor out, is a benevolent king and he wants to protect life and be peaceful, once again, is a description of God.
Here's the difference between us. I'm Odin's firstborn, the rightful heir, the savior of Asgard. And you're nothing.
The fact that she says she is the firstborn, the rightful heir to the throne, and the savior is once again another parallel to Jesus. Now, let's talk about Guardians of the Galaxy, okay? So totally different movie, right? You're starting to see that the heroes from Marvel share a lot in common with Satan. Now, Iron Man, we brought this up earlier, right? More of like an Antichrist type character, but he's this rich narcissist. I mean, that's more of like the devil's character traits than it is like Jesus. So Guardians of the Galaxy is a story where you have criminals in the universe that are going to save the world, right? They're the cast out people, the one that everybody hates, right? And they're the ones that are going to begin to save the universe. Now, I found this really interesting. Listen to the language that they talk about describing the villain in this series.
What were you thinking?
Dude, they were really easy to steal.
That's your defense?
Come on, you saw how that high priestess talked down to us.
So, the villain is a high priest, right? Here's the villain of the story, all decked out in gold. And you'll notice as you watch this clip.
Okay, guys, and here's something you didn't pick up. Yellow is the holy color. If you look up the color yellow, it's a holy color, and he didn't pick that up.
Everything is in order. Everything is perfectly symmetrical, right? And her name is the High Priestess. Listen how this guy interacts with her.
The delay, Admiral.
High Priestess, the batteries, they are exceptionally combustible and could destroy the entire fleet.
I'll confirm their flight against our people. We hired them and they steal from us. It is heresy of the highest order.
All command modules.
So, as you notice,
hey, not
again,
gonna see, bro.
In a very, very interesting pattern. Everything is very orderly. I mean, it's the same sort of thing if you watch Star Wars. It's like the rebellion is sort of chaotic. You look at the Republic, everything very in order, right? So very similar type setup that we got going on here. And they're called the sovereigns, which are in it, right? What does the word sovereign mean? Anyone want to take a stab at that?
Ruler.
The ruler, right? In fact, this is the sovereign. This is her throne. Notice there's light streaming out of it, right? God is the very source of light in heaven.
I see it within you. Fear, jealousy, betrayal. It is our duty to cleanse the universe of this weakness.
right? Heresy, high priestess, but you see the little jab that the high priest is really a girl. I mean, you know what I mean? It's just like a little tiny like slam that they got to do there. Sovereign means, if you look it up on the internet, supreme ruler, even a monarch, causing or possessing supreme or ultimate power. You can't attribute that to the devil. The devil does not have supreme power over God. Only God has supreme power in the universe from a Christian perspective, right? You're going to hear a phrase that's very interesting. And when you hear the phrase, I actually hear this phrase pop up in a lot of Marvel movies. So here's the phrase.
Well, to make it through that, you'd have to be the greatest pilot in the universe. Lucky for us.
So, in order to make it out of here, you would have to be the greatest I am. Right? Something you'll see pop up actually in a few different stories. Avengers, Age of Ultron. Similar type setup. You've got some ultimate power that was created, and the ultimate power that was created is this being, this digital being called Ultron. And he's actually created to be a peaceful being and to cause peace in the universe.
Okay, they didn't even pick up that Ultron was artificial intelligence. They didn't even pick that up. And Ultron opens portals and demons come through. So they didn't even pick that up either.
What is this? Hello, I am Jarvis. You are Ultron, a global peacekeeping initiative designed by Mr. Stark. This feels wrong. I'm a peacekeeping program created to help the Avengers. I don't get it. The mission. Give me a second. It's our time.
Once again, another parallel that's happening here.
On that poster, since Iron Man is the one like Christ, look at his hands.
Exactly, and he has something on his hands. I mean, that's something I didn't even notice before, but yeah, you're right. He has these marks on his hands and he shoots light out of them. I mean, we know Jesus will have the marks forever in his hands, even throughout eternity, for us to remember that by. So yeah, very interesting that you pointed that out. So Ultron is the ultimate evil in this particular series. Here's when the Marvel characters are actually meeting Ultron for the first time.
So question, Ultron is created a certain way.
Yes.
For peace. Becomes evil. What's the explanation?
That he basically saw everything that everyone was doing, and he then thought that the path to peace was literally to exterminate these people.
So, in other words, he thought that he had a better way than the creator.
Exactly.
Just like Satan.
And very interesting that it's the Marvel universe that created him. So that's a very Gnostic theme.
Mm-hmm.
When you have these demiurge, all these little sub-gods, and they created a god like Sophia, and it was Sophia that was the evil god and was the one that was cast out. They're flipping the model upside down. This is coming at you from a very Gnostic perspective. So here they're meeting Ultron for the very first time, and listen to the verbiage that is even used in this scene.
I'm on a mission.
What mission?
Peace in our time.
I'm on a mission, peace in our time. So his ultimate goal is to create peace.
How could you be worthy? You're all killers.
And his pathway to peace, he believes, is to wipe out anybody that is fighting on the other side of the fence, right? Now, why is that significant in a Christian worldview?
Christ is going to come back with fire and destroy the wicked and reset a kingdom of perfection.
Because just like Ultron, right here, right? Sin is infectious, infecting the entire universe, right? So how's God going to deal with it? He's going to destroy it, right? That is a crazy parallel that is happening even in here.
Interesting, like I'm assuming these are his warriors that are crashing through, and it's like everybody winds up looking like Iron Man. You know, it's like they're created in that image. Like this is as good as it can get. You know, you're duplicating that model.
Right. There's a lot of biblical terminology that is thrown out here, and you will see this, but I want to read to you. Psalms 85:8 says, I will listen to what God, the Lord, says. He promises peace to his people and his faithful servants, right? The Bible describes God as being instigator of peace, right? We're engaged in a war. We know that there's obviously a battle going on, but God is the God of peace. So listen to how the Avengers talk with Ultron, and you'll start to hear some biblical terminology.
How is humanity saved if it's not allowed to evolve? There's only one path to peace. The Avengers' extinction. I had strings, but now I'm free.
So, an interesting scene. He's basically saying there's one path to peace, the extinction of this group that's kind of like the rebels, right? So to say. And they kill him, he dies, but really he goes into everyone else. Now, speaking Christianity, right? God is literally, he died, but he literally is going into his followers, right? We're supposed to open our hearts and invite Jesus into our lives. So once again, another interesting kind of parallel. Ultron says something right here in this scene that you might find very biblical.
On this rock, I will build my church.
So upon this rock, I will build my church. Right? Who said that? Who said that? Jesus Christ, right? And I say unto thee that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. So very interesting, the very line that Jesus uses is used here. And Ultron meets up with his people that he's trying to deceive that are part of the Avengers side, and they're meeting in a church. Very interesting, right?
Did you know this church is in the exact center of the city? The elders decreed it so that everyone could be equally close to God.
I like that. The geometry of belief.
Very interesting. He's sitting on a throne in the very center of church, and that
what's on his head?
And that's how you get close to God. He's kind of got like a towel shawl thing over his head.
Almost like the Jews.
Right? You know, very interesting, sitting on a throne. So listen to the language that's still being used.
Is that why you've come? To end the Avengers?
I've come to save the world.
But when he's asked, why have you come? Literally come, right? He was created, remember? But why have you come? That's language that's used in heaven. And he says, I've come to save humanity. That's the very idea of Jesus, right?
Yeah.
In fact, the devil doesn't want to save you. He wants to destroy you. So you can't fit that model into the devil. Now, this particular character, his name is Vision, and the Avengers also create him to give him life. Listen to the language that's used in this particular scene when he meets the Avengers for the first time.
You think I'm a child of Ultron?
You're not?
I'm not Ultron. I'm not Jarvis either. I am.
Kind of interesting that here once again we see the same phrase, I am, and you'll notice this kind of pop up with a lot of them, right?
Yeah.
What is I am?
It's God.
The name of God, right? When Moses asked, what am I supposed to call you? He said, I am that I am, right? And so here he's saying, I'm not a child of Ultron. Listen to the verbiage that's used there, right? We are the children of God. I mean, even the way that they refer to people who follow Ultron is like what God's followers are called, right? So also here he's sitting there describing what the plan of action is to beat Ultron. Now, I find this very interesting. Listen to this.
I don't want to kill Ultron. He's unique. And he's in pain. But that pain will roll over the earth. So he must be destroyed. Every form he's built, every trace of his presence on the net.
So what did you just hear?
He doesn't want to destroy him. He wants to destroy everything that he stands for.
The image of him, right? He wants to utterly change every form, every thought, every idea, because that's the ultimate way to destroy someone, right? Even if they're there in your presence, but to destroy who that image is to people, that's the best way to beat them.
Because it turns your opinion of them, like, so now the whole world is coming against this person because they believe that their character is twisted, you know?
But it's exactly like what the devil is doing with God, right? In the Dark Ages, the devil knew the more Christians he killed, the more they popped up, right? So all of a sudden he goes, well, I can't just kill them because all of a sudden they're repopulating like crazy. What I can do is destroy the image of God in them. And he's taken over Christianity and twisted it, right? So I found this pretty interesting that this is literally the devil's plan to destroy God's image in your life. Now, listen to this even.
When the earth starts to settle, God throws a stone at it. And believe me, he's winding up.
What? You said God throws a stone at it?
So he's referring to a prophecy.
Okay.
I mean, that's what happens in Daniel. You know, there's a great stone, like a mountain, that comes and destroys the image that Nebuchadnezzar dreamed about. And God set up this. That was representative of God's kingdom being set up on earth.
So it will literally, prophecy, literally being spoken right here, saying that a stone is going to come and destroy this kingdom, right? But I found it kind of interesting because, you know, all these little phrases and everything, these words all go into everyone's mind.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, that was the whole reason we made that documentary about how your mind works called Pseudology, right? If you understand how the brain works and you sit in a dark room in a theater and open your mind as wide as you can open, all those words go in there and they stay in there, but you don't think about them. So putting words in people's minds that go and view these movies saying that, you know, God's just going to throw a stone at you and destroy you is a slam on God once again, right? Now, once again, you'll see more biblical imagery here.
You think you're saving anyone? I turned that key and dropped this rock a little early, and it's still billions dead. Even you can't stop that. This is the best I can do. This is exactly what I wanted. All of you against all of me. How can you possibly hope to stop me?
So, interesting, right? He's literally saying, you guys against me, how do you hope to stop me? And we saw in that other previous clip, right, they wanted to destroy his image, but listen to the end of this film, what he is basically describing when he comes to destroy the world, what people are looking for. What are they doing when they're looking up in the sky and the end of the world? Listen to this verbiage.
I was meant to be beautiful. The world would have looked to the sky and seen hope, seen mercy. Instead, they'll look up in horror because of you.
So, when he comes to destroy the world, people will be looking up into the sky for hope and mercy. That's the very, thing that the Christian church has been longing for since the beginning of time, right? And here's the scene in the very end when he literally is like in a second coming pose hovering over the world, and listen to what he says to the people.
Come to confess your sins.
Gotta know how much time you got.
More than you.
Have you been juicing?
This is how you end, Tony. This is peace in my time. Do you see the beauty of it? The inevitability. You rise only to fall.
Isn't this interesting? You rise only to fall, right? What's going to happen with the people at the end of the world? And? But literally in the very end, after Satan sits there for 1,000 years thinking about what he's done, the people will be resurrected and literally get a chance to see why they weren't allowed to come to heaven, only to fall again. Right? Yeah. Very typical. Even he's in this Christ-like pose, looking down on the people.
You know, it's funny. Is it a slam if it's true? Like all these parallels to the Bible, and it's painting in the light of, like, this is going to happen. This is true.
It is true.
Except at the end, it's kind of twisted where the person who has the figure of God falls, whereas the rebellion wins, which is incorrect from the biblical standpoint.
Right.
But I just find it interesting going through all of it. It's all true.
Right. You know what I mean? They're using biblical truth, but they're just flipping the the characters around, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, and they're just confusing you, but literally they're telling you the truth of what's going on. That's why I found this so fascinating when it kind of really wrapped my head around this 10-year venture that Marvel did.
It's been a decade of signs and wonders.
And the end game is paralleling what the Bible's telling us is going to happen in the end. That's what's crazy.
Yeah, because the viewer wants that guy defeated.
That's right.
He wants the judge or whatever. He wants the ones that they're going to rise and fall. We want to defeat the one who's going to do that.
That's right. That's right. So let's talk about Black Panther for a second. This was a massive movie. We made a documentary specifically centered around this film, and there was a lot of spiritualism in this movie, but once again, he's on the side of the Avengers, right? So we thought it would be appropriate to discuss him in this context. In the very beginning of the Black Panther, it's describing how he became the Black Panther.
A warrior shaman received a vision from the Panther goddess Bast, who led him to the heart-shaped herb, a plant that granted him superhuman strength, speed, and instincts. The warrior became king and the first Black Panther.
What's a shaman?
It's like a witch doctor type.
Witch doctor, right? Someone who uses witchcraft and sorcery. And so he meets a witch doctor, someone who has sorceress powers, and he goes and talks with Bast, an ancient Egyptian cat god, who gives him a piece of fruit to give him superpowers. Now, I can think of another story where an animal told you to eat a piece of fruit to give you superpowers. What's that?
That's a serpent, yeah.
That's the devil. I mean, literally right here, every single Christian should have walked out of the movie right here and said, hey, that's the story of the devil. But nonetheless, a lot of people stuck around. Bast is the ancient Egyptian cat god. And even on Marvel's website, it talks about in this necropolis, the city, the Wakandan city of the dead, right? What does necro mean? Dead. Polis means city. So in the city of the dead, that's where the Black Panthers go to die. When you ruled as the king of the dead. I mean, this is like the king of the dead. It even says he's an unconquered king of kings, lord of lords. I mean, those are names that are reserved for God. Yet he's the king of the dead. God is not the king of the dead. He's the king of the living. That's why they call him the living God. This is opposite of God, right? Isaiah 8:19-20 tells us, if we're going to look at the world through biblical eyes, to the law and to the testimony, if it speaks not according to this word, it is because there's no light in them, right? It has to line up with the Bible. Otherwise, it's not worth your time. That's basically what that's saying. So let's talk about when he meets his father, who's dead, and he goes through a ritual that sends him into this space where he can then go talk to the dead panthers. And in here, we have the panther sitting inside of the tree, and as he approaches the tree, the panther comes down and talks with him. I find it, once again, very interesting that we have a tree and an animal coming down to give you a piece of advice out of that tree. I'll let you sit and think on that for a little bit. Leviticus 26, though, says, and the soul that turneth after such that have familiar spirits, after wizards, to go a-whoring after them, I will set my face against that soul and cut him off amongst his people. Listen, witchcraft and sorcery is a very serious matter in the Bible. Yep. You do not, as a Christian, want God to tell you he's going to set his face against you. God is very merciful. He is very patient. But there are things that will push him past that mercy and patience. Witchcraft, look at the stories in the Bible. Turn through and just read the chapters that happened in the Old Testament. Anyone that constantly struggled with witchcraft and sorcery, they were literally sent out of the camp, and God said, this is severe enough. Don't even have them around you. Take them outside. Put them outside of your group.
And the Witch of Endor story.
In most cases, put to death.
Put to death, right? That's how serious it was in the Bible. So I believe it's as serious then as it is now for us. So anything with witchcraft and sorcery, turn it off. Don't even watch it, right? In the comic book for Black Panther, here's Black Panther talking with Bast. That's closer to Baphomet. I mean, literally, he's going and meeting with Baphomet to become the Black Panther. And as he meets with this Bast god, that's where Bast tells him, you're going to be the king of the dead. And Bast talks to him and says this line that we read from earlier, that you will be with all of the past Panthers when they go to die. You'll be a crowned and unconquered King of Kings. I mean, those names that are only reserved for God. He opens up Black Panther's third eye, and that's what really gives him the power to be the Black Panther. And then here's the Black Panther totally talking to all of the other dead Black Panthers to give them counsel. He says, hey, listen, I call upon the name of Bast. I call upon you for counsel. We're never supposed to call upon the spirits, right? There's tons of examples in the Bible where people called upon the spirits and it was disastrous. Leviticus 19:31 says, do not turn to mediums or necromancers to seek after them and to make yourselves unclean by them. I am the Lord your God. The Bible's very clear on necromancy, speaking to the dead, sorcery, witchcraft, any of that kind of stuff. It says that it will make you unclean. And if you're a Christian seeking for Christ's righteousness, this is not something that you even want to observe in a film. Now, I find it very interesting that after the Black Panther goes and speaks to that Bast-looking character, Bast tells him that there's coming days, a great fire in the sky. And, you know, it's like a fire in the sky that's coming to destroy the world. Looks very much like a second coming, but from an evil perspective, right? And it says that the great fire will bring about a great flood and the Wakandan walls will break. The city of the dead will fall. And that's what the Bible talks about. Revelation, you know, Babylon will fall. There will be a time that this happens. So once again, very interesting parallel. Doctor Strange, of course, just even analyzing the surface of this film, his superpower is black magic, right? That's why they call him the Black Magician. He is very much engaged in witchcraft, sorcery, divination, all of those things that the Bible strictly speaks against. But here's what black magic means. Magic invoking the supposed invocation of evil spirits for evil purposes. Now, if he's the master of the dark arts, he's the master at invoking evil spirits for evil purposes. Yeah. He's literally the one that is on the Avengers side, right? So you can start to see that all of these characters, like the Guardians of the Galaxy, they're the criminals and the thieves. They're the black magic sorcerers. They're the Black Panther, kings of the dead. Those are all attributes of Satan or his government.
Thor, who's cast out of heaven.
Thor, who's cast out of heaven, right?
It's kind of interesting. I know we bring up in one of our documentaries, I think it's Replacement Guns too. Doctor Strange's lair is called the Sanctum Sanctorum, which is Latin for Holy of Holies, which is where God is supposed to dwell, the Holy of Holies, you know.
Right, and that there's evil invocations of evil spirits being invoked in the sanctuary. I mean, that's just twisted in and of itself. But yes, Deuteronomy 18:10-12 gives us a picture of what sorcery and witchcraft is to God. There shall not be found among you anyone that makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire, or useth divination, or observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits, or a wizard, or a necromancer. For all that do these things are a what? Abomination to the Lord. What does the word abomination mean?
It's something that God hates.
Hates. Literally, the word abomination is the strongest language that God could use to say, I hate this thing. So how is it that we can watch movies with things that are clearly an abomination to God? What about Captain Marvel? So we're seeing a common thread run through here, right? Here, Captain Marvel, the person that she's fighting against, the evil villain in her story, is known as the Supreme Intelligence. Okay? So here is something that's very interesting as well. Who is the Supreme Intelligence in the universe? God. He is the one that is the top of the food chain everywhere, right? He's known as the most wise being, looking at it and judging it from a Christian perspective. But they make this person evil. And in the film, Captain Marvel, she doesn't really have a form. And if you look at the comic books, there are all sorts of different interpretations. She can kind of manifest herself in different forms, which I think is very interesting because no man has seen God, right? So here, Captain Marvel is having a discussion with the Supreme Intelligence. Listen to the verbiage that's even used here.
Veers,
Intelligence?
your commander insists that you're fit to serve.
I am.
So once again, we see that one of the Avengers is describing herself, and she says, "I am," and it just stops. Right? I find that very interesting that they keep writing that into the dialogue. So let's talk about the whole pinnacle of this whole series, which really kind of started coming to a culmination in Avengers Infinity War. You have this being called Thanos, who's the most evil character in the whole universe. He's the most powerful character in the whole universe.
Thanos is one of the darkest characters in the Marvel Universe. A character who can take on the entire Marvel Universe with a grin. There's something really arch-villain about that.
And he's specifically running throughout the universe and collecting stones that will give him that ultimate supreme power to be able to snap his fingers and wipe out half of the universe. And each one of these stones gives him a different superpower. And I'll tell you what some of the stones mean, and you can see that there's some very strange parallels to God. One of the stones gives him the ability to have control over space and time. One of them gives them control to create life out of nothing, to bend and warp reality. One of the stones gives him the ability to raise people from the dead. I mean, these are attributes that are literally only attributed to God. And so as he gets these stones, and they give him ultimate supreme power in the universe, he is going to snap his fingers and destroy half of the world. And the Avengers are trying to stop that. So in this scene, the Avengers have never actually seen the Guardians of the Galaxy characters yet. And so this is the first time that they've run into the Guardians of the Galaxy. And they're talking about whose side are you on. Listen to the language that they use.
Now, all right, let me ask you this one time. What master do you serve? What master do I serve? What am I supposed to say, Jesus?
Oh, by the way, that's, I find, extremely blasphemous, right? It's like, oh, it's a joke? Like, what am I supposed to say? I serve Jesus? Like, yes, if you're a Christian, you serve Jesus, and he died for you to have an opportunity. To passively throw this into a movie, I believe that's taking the Lord's name in vain. Here's an interesting side note. Chris Pratt was awarded at the MTV Movie Awards, goes up front, and is extremely open about his Christian beliefs. And he says this:
You have a soul. Be careful with it. God is real. God loves you. God wants the best for you. Believe that. I do. Learn to pray. It's easy, and it's so good for your soul. Nobody is perfect. People are going to tell you you're perfect just the way you are. You're not. You are imperfect. You always will be. But there is a powerful force that designed you that way. And if you're willing to accept that, you will have grace. And grace is a gift. And like the freedom that we enjoy in this country, that grace was paid for with somebody else's blood. Do not forget. Man, what a speech. Don't take it for granted.
Now, why I find that interesting is because he was in the Lego movie as the voice of Emmett. If you haven't seen this, you got to look at our LED on the whole Lego deception. But it was another attack against God. And here is an actor who's been part of the Guardians of the Galaxy, which is an attack on God, and the Lego movie, which is an attack on God. And yet he is not shy about his Christian beliefs, and he still does not see it for what it is. That's how deceptive this stuff really is. So I'm offended by this kind of thing.
I challenge people to watch a movie and not hear Christ's name blessed. I mean, it's in every movie now.
Right? It seems like every single movie breaks one of the commandments, right? And because we hear it so often, we're not sensitive to it anymore. So anyway, here's a scene with Thanos, and listen to the language that's used in this.
There are 2 more stones on Earth. Find them, my children, and bring them to me on time.
Father, we will not fail you.
If I might interject, if we're going to Earth,
He might want to guide.
So what do you notice out of a scene like this? How did he address the people?
His children.
And they addressed him as
Father.
Father.
Down to him.
Yeah, so these are names and things that are attributed to God and his characters, right? Children, I mean, you never hear the Avengers talk about children to anyone that like follows them, right? Because that's a name that literally in the Christian world is attributed to followers of Christ. So here he's talking with Loki. He ends up killing Loki. And while he's killing him, Loki says something very interesting to him. He said, "You will never be a god." And remember, all the Avengers, they consider themselves to be gods, right? I mean, they're always asked about their godlike powers, or they are gods, or they're self-proclaimed gods.
Or there's no doubt. I mean, that's mythology. That's mythology.
Loki too.
Exactly. So they're basically like throwing it in God's face. This would be a description of God, and saying that you are never going to be a god, right? Not the god, a god. So I found this very interesting. Here's another I am that pops up in the scene that Thanos meets the Avengers. Listen to how he describes he is coming, and he describes himself as the I am.
I ask you, to what end? Dread it? Run from it? Destiny arrives all the same. And now it's here. Or should I say, I am.
The fact that they highlight it like that tells me that that's so purposeful. Because really, he is the real I am. All the other ones are counterfeits, literally, of God, right? But in this story, he's in gold. He's the strongest character. He has the ability to wipe out half the universe. Let me ask you a question. Does Satan have the ability to wipe out any of the part of the universe?
No.
He probably would have already if he did.
That's right. Only God has the ability to cause a worldwide flood, right? Or allow it to happen, or wipe it out. That's God's power.
No, God's holding back the winds, so he can only do as much as God will allow.
That's right. But even in the end, when he lets the winds go, the devil is not allowed to kill God's people during that time. So the power is literally in God's hands that has that ability to begin with. So that was very interesting that he says that. Now here's a scene with Thanos and his daughter. He takes children from all the planets that he's basically taken over, and he's wiped out half of their existence. He basically takes children from there. And this is a scene between him and his daughter, Gamora. And notice how she goes and looks at his throne, and she says, "I hate that thing." Listen to this.
I always hated that chair.
So I've been told. Even so, I hoped you'd sit in it one day.
I hated this room. The ship. I hated my life.
So he's basically taking her back to where he kind of like rules from generally, and that's why she's having this conversation with him. And it's in his ship, I think. And that's why she says, "I hated that ship, I hated the chair, I hated all these things,"
He
right?
wants her to take over after he's gone.
Exactly. He wants her to rule, right? So the ship that she mentions in this is the ship that he comes to destroy the world in, and it's called the Sanctuary 2. The Sanctuary is a thing that's attributed to God, right?
Yeah, and this is like the I am who's giving his position to his daughter, his descendant.
That's right. The Sanctuary 2 is a massive warship, play on words, warship, like worship, right? And that's what he's coming to destroy the world. But here he's having a conversation with some of the Avengers, and listen to how he describes when he destroys half the world, what is he going to do after that?
With all 6 stones, I could simply snap my fingers. They would all cease to exist, and I call that mercy.
So he calls destroying half of the universe what?
Mercy.
Mercy, right? And so that's not something that you hear attributed to the devil or his team, right? It's always attributed to God. God is the merciful one, But he's saying that wiping half the people out is mercy, right?
Which I believe, God is going to destroy the wicked, because who wants to live for eternity in a world full of rapists, murderers? It's mercy on his children. He's saving us from those people.
That's right. It's merciful for you to not live in a life of sin forever. Here he's having a conversation with Dr. Strange, and Dr. Strange asks him what he's going to do.
Then what? I finally rest and watch the sunrise on a grateful universe. The hardest choices require the strongest wills.
So after he destroys the world, what happens? He rests. What happens when God does come at his second coming and destroys sinful humanity? There's a time of rest that happens after that. So that's very interesting. There's also another story parallel to God, and this story is when Thanos is looking for one of these infinity stones, and he gets one from this guy here, and in order to get the stone, he has to sacrifice one of his children.
The stone demands a sacrifice.
What?
In order to take the stone, you must lose that which you love. A soul for a soul.
Don't you find it interesting that the sacrifice, he's basically saying something that is so true. Sin requires a penalty to be paid for that sin, right? And here, God sacrificed his own son to pay that penalty for you and me.
And who does he end up sacrificing?
His daughter.
I'm saying, it's almost like this psychological warfare, because when you see these characters, instantly you think, oh, bad guy, cloak, looks like a skull, a Grim Reaper.
Looks like death.
Yeah, so if you're just watching with your eyes, you're seeing bad guys, good guys. But God does not judge on the outward appearance; He judges on the heart, the character. So if you were just to say, "Who said I am the I am? Who can destroy the universe? Who's going to sacrifice the son?" All these characteristics, attributes, people would say, "Oh, that's God." But it's painted where you're seeing it as the enemy.
So what's kind of crazy is in this scene where he actually throws his daughter off and destroys her because he wants the power to be able to destroy half of the planet. So it's not that he literally does it because he's loves everybody, right? He believes that this is the only path to be able to make the universe go forward, and so he does it in a cold-hearted manner.
All my life, I dreamed of a day, a moment, when you got what you deserved. You kill and torture, and you call it mercy. The universe has judged you. You failed. And do you want to know why? Because you love nothing. No one. Tears.
They're not for him.
No. This isn't love.
I ignored my destiny once.
Isn't that crazy? So if they set this up to be a character like God, he heartlessly doesn't care. He's going to destroy half the universe. He calls it mercy, but yet everyone else that's viewing him is like, you don't care about anything. Listen, God sent Jesus down here to die your sin, my sin, because he wouldn't spare even the littlest thing in heaven. He gave us the greatest thing in heaven so that you and I could have that opportunity. So opposite of what they're saying right here. I mean, this is literally, if you asked Satan, what's the war in heaven like? This is exactly how he'd answer it. You are the cold-hearted one. The world and the universe has judged you and found that you love nothing. Yeah. No, that love was proven in the palm of Christ's hands. As he hung on the tree, it was Satan that put him there, and he didn't deserve it.
Moreover, Jesus was willing to do that for us.
Yeah.
There seems to be a lot of intimacy between this father and the daughter.
Gonna sacrifice you. He doesn't care. He's not crying for you. That tear is not for you. That is a slam on God right there. And so as a viewer, like you said, Kendi, as a viewer, you watch this and you go, yeah, he's evil. Thanos is evil. And you know what? That's exactly what I found on the internet. I read article after article about atheists that were literally saying Thanos is the most evil character in the world. And if Thanos is like a god, I would never serve that type of god. And that's what atheists are literally saying, right? Yeah. And so here is a flipping of that idea, and you as a viewer, they psychologically rope you in to try and understand from Thanos' perspective, but the end game of what you just watched right there is that you're going to hate him.
Every atheist that I talk to, this is the way they see God.
Yep.
They don't see him in his true character. They've been seeing this all their life.
Yep.
And it's the seed is planted.
Yep. There's a reason why they call this programming, right? Yeah. This is a program that's programming your brain to literally fight and hate God. So that was the Infinity War. Thanos ends up in the end of Infinity War. He snaps his fingers. Half of everybody dies. So it's like this end of the world scene where people are just dissipating off into the dust of the world, right? And then literally this blew my mind. Endgame steps on the scene. And this is the trailer to Endgame. The very first words that come out of Tony Stark's mouth are this.
Yeah, 1,000 years.
God, seems like 1,000 years ago. I fought my way out of that cave. Became Iron Man.
1,000 years ago. It seems like 1,000 years. Why not 1,500 years? Why not 600 years? Why not 800 years? Why do they have to use a number that literally describes how Satan will sit here by himself thinking of what he did for that 1,000 years? And then it takes place after everybody's already gone. It's like they picked up the story, second coming comes, everybody dies, right? And then now they're picking it up after that 1,000 years is up.
And the roles are reversed. You know, he had the attributes of Christ, but he's the one that's stuck on earth for 1,000 years.
It's like Revelation 20, verse 7. After the 1,000 years have expired, Gog and Magog come together for the battle of the great day of the God Almighty, right? And literally, that's where this story is picking up. You see, if you understand where the war between God and Satan started, you can start to begin to wrap your head around what's really truly going on. In Ezekiel 28:16 through 17, it talks about Lucifer. This is a prophetic speech about Lucifer, and it says, "By the multitude of thy merchandise they have filled the midst of thee with violence, and thou hast sinned. Therefore I cast thee out as profane out of the mountain of God. And I will destroy thee, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire." Now question, what is a covering cherub?
Angel who stood in the presence of God, or who does stand in the presence of God.
And that is symbolized by what?
Ark of the Covenant.
The Ark of the Covenant, right? When we had the Ark of the Covenant, those angels whose wings touched over the top of it were called the covering cherubs. And what's inside of the Ark of the Covenant?
Yeah, 10 Commandments, was the Aaron's rod, the budded, and a bowl of manna.
That's right. So all of a sudden, we have these angels that are literally hovering over, protecting the law of God. In fact, it was the very job of the covering cherub in heaven was to share with the world what the character of God was like. That's why Satan was so damaging when he went around to all the evil angels and he told them, you know what, God's really not very loving. He's not really nice. They believed him because why? The covering cherub is next to God. So as they sat there and listened to this person, they would say, hey, well, wouldn't you know what God's really like? You're the one that stands next to him.
He was like an insider, whistleblower.
He was an insider, and that's why he was so effective to bring all the angels with him when he did. Isaiah 14:12 through 14 says, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will extend my throne upon the stars of God. I will sit upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend into the heights of the clouds, and I will be like the Most High." Now, this makes me question, if Satan is saying he wants to be like the Most High, what's God like? God is love, right? In fact, that's what the Bible describes God as. So Satan is literally saying, I can be love or loving just like you, but I don't need to follow your rules, God. And obviously we can see what has happened since then. The word devil in Greek, diablos, means to accuse or bring charges with hostile intent. That's what the word devil means, to accuse. The word Satan in the Greek, satanas, means adversary or slanderer. The word widespread trade that was used in Ezekiel 28:16, it's called rekula, literally means to traffic, merchandise, or peddle. And that's exactly what the devil's doing. He's peddling lies about God. When you look at the word peddling in the dictionary, it means to travel about and sell something, or to engage in the illicit sale of narcotics, to travel about selling wares, or to occupy oneself with trifles. Literally, the devil is peddling lies about God, and he's been doing it from the beginning. So I find it very interesting that Revelation 12:10 describes Satan as this. I heard with a loud voice saying in heaven, now is come salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before God day and night. You see, the devil only has one trick. In this war between God and Satan, the devil has one trick, and every single thing fits under that one trick. And the one trick that he does, literally, is to represent the character of God in a false light. He can only attack God and attack who he is and attack what he's like. And so this war is being played out so that the whole entire universe will say God is a loving and righteous judge. Or, like Satan says, they will believe the lies that are told against God. This Marvel universe that everyone is obsessed with, I mean, $1.2 billion in a few days is so mind-boggling. But you know what? It's the devil's Bible. It's literally the devil's story on what's going on between the war between God and Satan, and it just makes a lot of sense to me why the world gravitated towards it. Everyone's listening to the lies that the devil is telling.
Well, there's a common question. You know, we're looking at this through the eyes of the Bible. We're Christians. Do you honestly think that the directors of this film all sat together in a room and said, hey, you know, let's attack God, let's attack Christianity, and formulate this story to kind of influence and program people against God?
Okay, so in the Infinity War, there is a menu on the DVD. If you buy the DVD, the Blu-ray DVD, there's actually a whole commentary between the directors, and in that commentary, the directors themselves said that Thanos is a godlike character that has a messianic complex. You don't use those kind of words or that kind of terminology unless you know something, literally. Even if they don't know what's going on, right? We know that God can suggest things to us just like the devil can suggest things to us. So I believe that if people are opening themselves up to the spirit world, right? The devil can come in and give them ideas, and they can go, oh, wow, I came up with this really great idea for a Marvel cinematic character, right? And it has all this common congruent, common denominators with God, right? But maybe they didn't sit around and just say, hey, I think that's God. When Jesus told the story about casting the demon out of the man's mind, and the demon went away, and the man swept up his mind, and he came back and checked on the man, and he found that the man had left his house empty, wasn't filled. Then the demon went out and he got 7 more unclean spirits, and he came back and the man was worse off than he was before. What that tells me is we are empty vessels. You're either filled with the Spirit of God, or if you're empty, you open yourself up for the devil to come in, and the devil's not going to knock on the door of your heart and say, excuse me, can I come in? He's just going to come right in. He's going to bring his friends. They're going to post up and have a great time in your mind, right? So I think that these people that are coming up with some of these storylines maybe don't realize they're being used by the devil, and that's why we see this common denominator. But my question to them would be, if there's 101 million things to talk about, why are you always gravitating towards this? Why does every evil character share a common trait with God?
Why is there always biblical language in
Why
your
is there biblical
movies?
language? Why on this rock I will build my church? Why would you even say that in the line?
And the directors, a lot of them say, I got this script from a dream, a vision, you know, and then like Grant Morrison and the other guy, Grant Morrison, he's into the magic. He's like making symbols and sitting in the middle of them and telling people that demons are telling me to write this stuff.
That's right. That's right.
And it's not like they're using the Quran or the Bhagavad Gita or any other ancient text.
Why doesn't he use Muslim words?
Yeah.
Why doesn't he use, like some Buddha words or whatever? Like, it's like they're literally using the words that are attributed to God or Jesus said or whatever. And to me, that's just twisting the idea of who God is.
You have to be pretty ignorant to think that it's all just coincidence or pointless.
That's right. That's right. And I mean, when you see it even outside of, let's say, this world, like the Marvel Universe, like the one we did on Star Wars, right? You can look it up on YouTube, see our video on Star Wars. You'll see the exact same formula that's being used. There is common traits that are between God and Satan, and they're just flipping the idea where God is evil and Darth Vader is the evil one, but yet he's more like Jesus than he is like the devil would be like Darth Vader. So, these things I think are slid in these movies for a reason, and I think there's a reason why we're pointing these out and saying, listen, you've got to know the truth. The only way you can spot these things is by studying the truth. You're not going to sit down and watch a movie like this and be all of a sudden like, I know what the truth is and I can see everything that they're doing, unless you have a relationship with God. And once you do, you hear buzzwords like that, like I'll build my house upon this rock. Then all of a sudden you're like, hey, wait, I remember that from my Bible, and you know what the truth is. And you'll finally, I believe, get to the point where, well, I don't want to watch a movie that slams my God. I don't want to. Why would I want to do that? Even if it's cool, I could find better ways to spend my time. So,
what do you guys think the end result is for the Christian and non-Christian? Why do you think Hollywood is pushing these particular themes over and over and over again?
You want to know what the end result is? This is the end result right here, okay? 2 Thessalonians 2, 9 through 12 says this: the coming of the lawless one will be in accordance to how Satan works. Now pause. What does it mean to be lawless?
A rebel against God's commandments.
Not follow the laws, right?
Yeah.
So we know that the Bible speaks that there will be a time in the end where a lawless one will be in accordance to how Satan operates. What they're doing is they're setting people up. There is a division that is happening right here. You are either a follower of God or you will be a follower of Satan. There will be a time that there is no middle ground. Those wheat and those tares are growing up together, and I believe that separation is beginning to be seen now. So if you constantly watch erroneous things, you train your brain to focus on the errors or to digest the errors and not be able to discern truth. So listen to what the Bible says. He will use all sorts of displays of power through signs and wonders that serve the lie, and all the ways that wickedness deceives those who are perishing. They perish because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. So how do people lose their salvation?
They're not focusing on the truth.
They don't love the truth. So my idea is, when you watch all of these errors all the time, you totally lose your discernment for truth. The devil's going to step on the scene and deceive people. We know that prophetically from the Bible. In the end of the time, it's like his master opus plan is like one more last-ditch effort to try to get as many people on his side as possible. And the people that get deceived because they don't love the truth. The better you know the truth, the better you won't be deceived. For this is the reason that God sends them a powerful delusion, that they will believe the lie. So God even has to allow this separation to happen, and so that all will be condemned who have not believed the truth, but have delighted in wickedness. And let's be honest, don't these movies look wicked? Isn't it full of wickedness? Killing, murder, sexual immorality, you name it. All of that wickedness is in these movies. Why? They're getting darker and darker. And you know what's crazy is when I see little kids running around that have seen all these things.
Dressed like the Black Panther.
I believe it is high time. Know your master. Learn to have a relationship with Jesus. And how you do that is by studying and getting familiar with the very source of truth, the Holy Bible.
Amen.
Thank you guys for listening. I hope that this was beneficial to you. Leave a comment in here. We want to hear from you guys. We're excited to put this show out, LED.
Okay, that's LED Live if you want to subscribe to them, guys. Okay, I'm out. See you tomorrow, guys. God bless.